even though that says it stopped? Okay, me and Dan are live. Good evening. I think there's some more chairs at the back that are stacked there. If you want to unstack some chairs and move up to the front, it's kind of like church, your last one in, so you get to sit at the front of the church. All right. Good evening and welcome to the Council Advisory Committee CAC meeting of the 13th of March 2023. This meeting is being held in chambers and the meeting is being live streamed on Facebook Live, and the most up-to-date meeting package is on the Town of Kentville website. This meeting is called to order. Have all of the councillors received and reviewed their meeting package? Does any member of council have information pertaining to a matter before this council which has not been publicly circulated? As the Council Advisory Committee, CAC, we will vote as a committee to either send business forward to the council meeting for ratification, return to staff for further information or review, or defeat the recommendation. I will remind members of council that we should continue to be mindful of our decision-making wheel to make balanced and respectful decisions while adhering to our code of conduct. This council, through policy and by motion, has adopted Robert's Rules as our rules of order, our parliamentary procedure, and as the chair of the meeting, it is the chair's responsibility to use those orders to ensure the business of the town is conducted. The council will be voting electronic on all motions except administrative, which will be by show of hands. Are there any conflict of interest issues we should be aware of before the meeting commences? The chair notes that we have quorum. We have been provided with a proposed agenda. Are there any further or additions to the agenda, CAO?
Mayor Snow, we have no changes to the agenda at this time.
Thank you very much. And if I could have a motion to adopt the agenda, please. Deputy Mayor and Councillor York for the second. Thank you. All those in favor? Those opposed? The motion is carried. Thank you. The Council Advisory Committee meeting of February 13 of 2023 minutes were distributed for approval. If there are no changes to the minutes, they are approved as distributed. If there are changes, the recording secretary will annotate the minutes in red, and the annotated minutes will be added to the electronic meeting file as approved. Councillor Zabian.
Thank you. Just have one change under Section F, Administration. Councillor Huntley called a point of order against myself, but you ruled that my question was valid, so I was able to ask it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further changes? Moving right along. You also have the Council Advisory Committee meeting from the Capital Plan presentation on February 21st. And if there are no changes to those minutes, they are approved as distributed. If there are changes, the recording secretary will annotate the minutes, and they will be added to the electronic meeting file. No changes? All right, moving right along. This evening, we have two presentations. Our first presentation is Mentoring Plus Strategy with Gordon Michael, and our second presentation is Homeless No More Data Report with Alicia Christie. Each presentation will provide you with 10 minutes to make your presentation and then questions from council. So Gordon, the podium is yours.
Thank you very much for having me here this evening to give you an update on the Mentoring Plus strategy. First of all, I would like to thank the council and your ongoing support for this initiative. As you may remember, this project started on November 1st of 2019. 3 months later or 4 months later, COVID hit us and it caused everybody to go sideways. This project is about taking the retired population and using their skills and knowledge to connect to many different populations and help them with careers and understanding the future of work and the world of work. For your information, it's quite interesting when you look at some quick demographics. Anybody in this room who was born between 1947 and 1963, that's the post-war baby boomers. Those people that are born in 1947 turn 75 in 2022. And those people born in 63 turn 60 in 2023. We have a large population in that group. In this area, it's based on the 21 census, it's about 40% of the population are in that age demographic. And so what we did with this idea was take that information of people who are retired and connect them to many populations. I gave you a report that gives you an outline of all the details of the projects. But basically what we're doing is connecting to high schools, we're connecting to university, the community college, and many employment-related programs that are out there. What this does, it brings knowledge about different jobs that exist. It helps young people and others try to figure out what to do in their lives because you're talking to people who've actually done these jobs. And the interesting part about this is that we're now looking at the whole area of health. With the issue today going on of people want to work in the health system, we're actually working with retired doctors, medical people who are going into high schools. St. FX University is doing a project with us tomorrow night where we're bringing in retired medical people talking to students about what they could be doing in the health professions. So this is how this project has taken off. And the interesting part about this is that what we do is we call these knowledge exchanges. And these knowledge exchanges cut many areas. We have a business sector looking at helping business people get on with their life in the business world by bringing retired business people together. And we also have those business people going into high schools, talking to students about how to run a business or what it's like to run a business. So all this knowledge sharing is quite interesting, and it's slowly growing in the 3 regions that we're working in, including Truro and the Glasgow. In addition to that, we have something called an age-friendly plan. Now, what we're doing is we're taking the concept of looking at your region and what are the organizations that are out there that are trying to provide services to seniors and other populations. And what we want to do is bring them together so they can see the benefit of working together, and then you start to find out where the gaps are. And so this is, and we like to tie that into your accessibility plan that many of you have already put in place, because it all comes together around that idea. And so we've created a model like this in the town, in the New Glasgow region with 6 municipalities, and we'd like to do that in this region as well as in the Truro area. So this project has So where we are, the funding has been for 4 years. It's hard to believe that this fall, the funding is up, but I've been in discussions with people in Ottawa about extending it. And we've also had meetings with the Provincial Department of Education and the Provincial Department of Labor, Skills and Immigration. And so they're the people who are interested in unemployment and employment issues. And we see that this project can help people, help them with their lives so they can make some decisions. The interesting part about this is we've done sessions with parents and students and the community college. And the questions that come out of that are quite interesting as parents trying to work with their young people, trying to make decisions. This really helps them in a way of, I thought I wanted to be this, well, I really don't want to do that now. And that saves money for people and gets people in the right direction. And so I just wanted to bring that to your attention, show you in that handout of what the different initiatives that the coordinator is doing. And it just has, I think, many opportunities. And what it does for the retired people, it gets them out of the house. It gets them engaged. It gets them in the community, providing their knowledge. And the project is really about reducing social isolation among seniors. And what this does is get them connected back in the community, something meaningful to do, and gives them a sense of purpose. So on May 16th, we're going to be having a summit on this topic in Truro, and you'll all be getting an invitation to attend. And think about some people you think should be there to help understand it and support it, and look at how that can impact your community. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Gordon. Are there any questions for Mr. Michael? Councillor York.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I was wondering if you could talk briefly about how the program might discuss the changing landscape of the careers from the students who are participating for Gen Z and those baby boomers that you spoke about. So I'm assuming that how you enter a medical field and how you conduct business in 2023 is probably vastly different than how it was conducted in 1973.
You're right.
Can you speak to how the program addresses that changing landscape?
What we basically do is, as you see, is bring in a retired person to talk about their experience, keeping in mind the changes that are taking place in society today. And I think what that does is it creates a dialogue on where it has been and where it's going. And I know that the whole issue of technology today, and it is quite a different world. And but however, it's as we go through this, what we try to do is ask the people, the mentee, what you would like to know. We also then do workshops for the mentors as well on different topics, so they're aware of these changes. But you're right, there is a lot of other shifts that need to happen, and I think that's how this program, I think we have to start looking at that down the road.
And if I might, is your program addressing the specific populations that have been historically excluded from those top tier positions in those professions? So are you recruiting people of First Nations descent and African Nova Scotians and women in those mentee positions?
Depends on the community.
Or sorry, mentor positions.
Yeah, it depends on the community. We're working with those populations, and it's a challenge, but we are doing it. Yep.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Thanks for your report. Just wondering, just what some of your success stories might be, like if you have one or two of them, maybe just one that you could share with us that you've been successful with.
I think from the mentee side, I think the interest there is that we're getting more requests from the mentees to say, I want to know more about these topics. I'll tell you an interesting story. The time I couldn't go there because of COVID, but it was in New Glasgow, and one evening at their health and fitness center, the community college put a whole thing on trades. And they had parents and students at tables, and the mentors as well, and they had different topics. the interesting one they told me was about a young guy wanted to be a plumber. And the plumber said to him, "How's your stomach?" "Why?" He says, "Well, it's a little difficult, interesting job." And once he told him about it, he said, "I don't want to be a plumber anymore." So that was pretty basic. I thought that would help us.
Yeah.
On the mentor side, it's really interesting, the comments we get, because it does say that they love doing this job. They see the interest for them, but also, as one guy says, it gets me out of the house, it gets me engaged. And I think that's the critical, and it'd be good to do a study on this to see if it actually reduces mental health issues, isolation, and that's where I think this can go. And we had a meeting the other day with a lady in New Glasgow who works with seniors at home who were isolated. And now we're trying to figure, how can we work with that population? I want to talk to these women, because that's what we got to be doing. How do we reach people who are at home who feel they don't have anything to contribute? But everybody has something to contribute here. It's just, how do we make it connect?
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Counselor Maxwell.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It was really good, and being a former educator, I believe in mentoring, and I know that a lot of businesses and so on today are doing mentoring within their business.
That's right.
So I think it's a big topic. I think that the core of a job probably stays pretty much the same. It's the outside of it that changes, the new technology and things like that. But as you mentioned with the plumbing example, the basic core of that job and what it's about and what is needed and required, I think stays the same. And so it would be good for young people to know what that core is. Once you get in there, you're going to spend 35 plus years in there. It would be nice to know that before you spend a lot of money on education. So I think it's really good for students, and from that perspective, and I also, being retired, I think it's really great for seniors to get involved in that program, and it certainly would be good to get them out into the communities. And they do have a wealth of knowledge, and I think sometimes we forget about that, and I think that's very important. We overlook that aspect. So thank you very much.
Well, one thing that's come out of this too, I didn't mention, is that many seniors are now going into facilities that they never have gone into when they lived in those communities. Schools, other centers, office buildings. We didn't know this existed out there because they're just normal, you know what I mean? It's quite interesting how it breaks down a lot of those types of issues that are out there.
So Gordon, you said that this program started in 2019, and I realize that there was a pilot program in New Glasgow, and that happened, I'm assuming, in 2017, 2018 timeframe. So that puts us 5 years gone on that. So I'm gonna extrapolate and say that some of those mentees are probably graduating now.
Yeah.
So have you heard from any of them?
Yeah, we haven't had an opportunity to follow that up.
Okay.
Yeah, when we first did those pilots, we're just pretty shooting from the hip and seeing how this is gonna work.
Okay.
But you're right, I think as this goes on, then we can approach other resources and say, let's study this and see the impact.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you very much. If there's no further questions, always wonderful to have you visit. And once we get the information with regards to the summit in
Yeah.
Truro,
Right.
we'll look at some attendance.
That'd be great, thanks very
All
much.
right. Thank
Appreciate it.
you.
Thank you.
All right, is Alicia? Okay, there you are.
Thank you. Hello. Just gonna, I'm 5 feet tall, so when I saw this podium, I was like, okay, we just have to figure it out.
Okay, well,
I can see you folks. You might just like see my eyes over
Okay.
there, but you folks can see me, so that's okay.
so you may want to adjust the
mic?
mic. Yeah,
Yes.
just because that's how
Maybe
your
I'll
audio
stand
gets
here.
on Facebook.
I'll stand here, and I
Okay,
can see you
perfect.
folks and see you folks.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, I'm just gonna figure out what we're doing here before we go too far.
Okay.
So this is the mouse on here, eh? Do I click to go through? No, arrows.
Yeah.
Wow.
Spacebar.
space bar on here. Okay, I won't touch it just yet. Well, thanks so much for having me, everyone, council and staff, and the lovely amount of community members who are here this evening. I'm here tonight to speak to you about the community support and service-based count on rural homelessness. This was a partnership between Homeless No More Annapolis Valley, which I'm sure you've heard Rachel Bedingfield speak to multiple times, and Acadia University's Community Development Department, in particular with Dr. Mary Sweetman, who is in the crowd here, and myself, Alicia Christie, as her co-researcher, and my pronouns are she, her. So just a few things to sort out before we go too far. I do want to acknowledge that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Additionally, when we speak to rural homelessness tonight, I invite all of us in the room to be considering all the factors that contribute to someone landing in a precarious housing or homelessness situation and hold a lot of empathy for that. Any number we see on the screen tonight does represent an individual in this region and as well as in our community. So I invite us to think of that. And before we get started, we'll go here. The research tonight is based on a count that was in between West Hants to Digby. So we're looking at this portion of Nova Scotia. I will speak to those statistics, and I'll also dive into Kings County in particular, your community, the town of Kentville, to help prepare you on this issue so you know what to speak to. So you folks already have a few things in place that are supporting this issue. Within your municipal planning strategy, you do have the policy RS22 that does encourage affordable housing within the community. You also have your accessibility plan that did put in practice the opportunity for first voice experience to lead policy and planning. You also have the Kentville Moves Active Transportation Plan that does prioritize routes to both school and employment hubs, which is huge for someone who's perhaps experiencing low income or insecure housing. So we'll dive into the process and statistics. You might be wondering, Alicia, what is this count you're talking about? It is a community support and service-based count, which is a best practice estimation of homelessness by collecting information from knowledgeable service providers and key community informants. For example, this community, you have many, some of which are the Chrysalis House, Open Arms, etc. So this is to figure out how many people are experiencing homelessness within a given area and set time frame. So for our count, it was in the month of November 2022 and between West Hants to Digby, as in that included our First Nation reserves as well. So how does it work? We reach out, both Mary and I connect with these organizations. They become our co-researchers. So we prepare them to complete the surveys. We then analyze the data, which we are still doing a little bit of that right now per individual community. And then we start sharing the data. And this is our first presentation to folks that are not our organizations. So you're getting a sneak peek before a lot of other folks do. So our organizations will screen individuals. So are they located within the study site, again, between West Hants to Digby? Are they above the age of 16? And does the client meet one of the Canadian Observatory of Homelessness definitions? So we were looking at 4. There's unsheltered. This might be what we think of when we think of homelessness, someone who is living on the streets or in a place unintended for human habilitation. Emergency sheltered, this includes overnight shelters. Provisionally accommodated, that might be a new term for some folks. That's if someone is experiencing temporary accommodations, perhaps they're staying with a friend or family, but it's not long-term, and at risk of homelessness. So maybe this individual recently lost a job, they've experiencing homelessness before, they may be rent evicted or have received an eviction notice. So let's get into the data. Again, I'm gonna start at a regional level on the statistics, and that'll be followed up with statistics just based on your community. So the ones we look at regional, afterwards will come into Kentville. So overall, based on our best estimation, there is a known 231 individuals between West Hants to Digby who are experiencing one of those forms of homelessness. And among them, there is an additional 124 children. So if we put those numbers together, we're looking more so at the 350 mark. The average age was 28, with the highest age groups being 20 to 29. And there was a sort of even split between gender identity between male and female. We did also ask about non-binary and if someone just did not know. As I move through the slides, you'll notice there's a lot of numbers. Just in being mindful of time, I won't read them all. You folks have it in your package, and for the folks in the room, there will be other ways to access this as well. So at a regional level, majority of folks were provisionally accommodated at 44.6%. That's followed by at risk of homelessness, 25.5%, followed by unsheltered and emergency sheltered. And you'll notice when we switch to Kentville later on, these numbers do change and shift. So where are clients residing between these areas? Our three big ones are Kings County, West Hants, and Annapolis County. And when we look at Kings County with the 116, 45% reside within the town of Kentville. Where are clients accessing supports? Many folks are accessing support in your community with 112. That's followed by Windsor and followed by Middleton. Folks are also accessing many other supports in other communities. Again, when we look at the age, there's that huge age demographic between 30 to 39. That's our highest group right there. Again, average age being 28. Where do they obtain their income? Number one is income assistance, followed by full-time employment and different child tax benefits, and etc. Has the client been compromised? This is a hard statistic, so I'm being mindful of that for folks in the room. For sexual exploitation, there is 23 who are known to be experiencing that, 14 criminal exploitation, and there's 26 who are in or returning to an abusive relationship. Again, this is based on known information of the individual. So these individuals, when expressing what's keeping them from finding a place of their own, the number one answer is that rents are too high in their communities at 192. It's followed by low income, and then followed again by poor housing options and conditions available, then mental illness and family conflict as something contributing to their ability to access housing. When we look at some of the assets or supports someone has in their community, we see some high numbers around family doctor, primary health care. That's incredible. We also have community connections and different access to transportation and reliable family and friends. When we look at how long someone's been experiencing homelessness, the number one answer is 2 years or more at 54 individuals. That's followed by 1 to 6 months at 40. And when we transition to look at the town of Kentville, the numbers are similar, but however, the 1 to 5-6 months is the most common answer. That is followed by 2 years. So both at a regional level and community level, we are looking at chronic homelessness numbers, which is defined as someone who's been experiencing homelessness for at least 1 year or who has experienced that a few different times within 3. So moving into Kentville a bit more, again, Kings County, there was 116, 52 of which reside in the town of Kentville, all of which are accessing supports in your community. 15 of them are accessing different supports external to Kentville. When we look at their housing situation, 42.3% of them are emergency sheltered, 32.7% are provisionally accommodated, followed by at risk and unsheltered. Again, with the age, we are pushing the early ages here, with 46% are under the age of 30. And among that 46%, 70% of them are at risk of homelessness or provisionally accommodated. This does provide a unique opportunity for prevention in your community, that these folks have some form of housing at the moment, and there might be a unique way to support that before they slip into unsheltered or emergency sheltered. So of the individuals in this community, 19 are known to have children, and among them there's 26. So you had 52 in this community. If we add the children to that number, we're looking at a bit closer to 80 individuals experiencing the impacts of homelessness. Again, income is mainly coming from income assistance and other sources. What's keeping them from finding a place? The top 3 answers were the same at the regional level as they were in this community. Rents are too high, they have low income, there's poor housing options available. When we look at assets, similar numbers to the regional level, we do have access to primary care, family doctor, access to nature, and community connections. So this data is a tool. to better understand what's happening across our region as well as within our own community. And when we use it to project what might happen, for context, this study was also completed in 2020 by Dr. Mary Sweetman and master students Lindsay Slade. And in 2020, there was 26 individuals in the town of Kentville known to be experiencing homelessness. In 2022, there's 52, which is 1.8 times higher. If we use that to project, being mindful that this is only 2 data points, if we use that to project, in 2024, we would see 93, and in 2026, we'd see 168 in this community if nothing were to change and there wasn't a second pandemic or other things to happen to influence those numbers. Unpredictabilities are not included in those projections. So this is a lot of statistics at once. I'm talking fast, we're moving through it, and I haven't spoke to all the statistics that we do have. There was about 24 questions on the survey. This only covered such a small handful of that this evening. There will be other ways to access that data, and of course, you can reach out to Mary Sweetman or myself to stay involved and to hear more, and we are hoping that come later in the year, we will have an opportunity to bring different folks who influence policy like yourself together in a room across our region to really dive into this and what this means for our region and for our communities. And many of you in the room might have had this printout. If not, there was some more printed. It does have a few more statistics than what was spoken to this evening. And if your brain's like, I can't remember those numbers, you can always take a look back at this. So thank you so much, folks. I think at this point, we bring it to questioning.
Excellent, Alicia. Thank you so very much for your presentation this evening. Council, are there any questions for our presenter? Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Worship. Thanks, Alicia. Just a question about this. Are you or the professor in any way in contact with the province? Are they aware of?
Yeah, this is a really fun question for me. If anyone has connects at the province, I'm actually having a very large issue right now getting people to respond. I've been jumped around. They just did a housing assessment at the end. Some of you may have participated. There was an assessment done, an online survey in December of 2022. And when I saw that, I was like, of course, we have to make sure our numbers are captured because it's an online survey. Folks who are experiencing homelessness likely don't have access to that, nor do they have the time to do that. There's many other things that are required of them. There was initial interest to include our data, and at this point, there seems to be a slowing down of that. So I'm gonna keep trying and really advocate that these numbers are spoken to because we know from our previous organizations that having the numbers allowed them to secure more funding than they ever had in previous years. So connecting with the province is a huge priority for us, and we're going to keep working on that. If anyone has really good connections, I'll chat with you later.
Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Alicia, for your presentation. I have one question where lack of affordable housing is one of the biggest, I guess, reason. Do we know or have a sense of where the ballpark would be on rents for that group? Like, what makes it too high? When do we hit it's too high?
Right.
Yeah.
This is a great question, and for folks who may or may not know, when we're using the term affordable housing, often that's calculated by census data within a region. So whatever the average income within a given region, that's how we get that 30% of what is affordable housing. And that can be skewed in certain communities. I was speaking to a group in Wolfville today, as we can imagine, when you have a student population that's often filing their taxes in another province, so that's often missed. So it is a really interesting question that I think is changing yearly right now. We don't have a direct number of if it's $400 or $500 a month, etc. However, I will speak to, there is the Canadian Mental Health Association does have, through their Project Hope, they do help folks secure housing based on 30% of their income. So if they are receiving CPP or et cetera, let's say they make $1,000 a month, they'll find housing. Let's say the rental unit is $1,500 a month. whatever the 30% is of their 1,000, so if it's $300, the individual through the Project Hope program will only pay the $300 and then they'll fund match. So the landlord is still meeting. So there's avenues to navigate that, to have a direct answer on what a specific affordable housing. I don't have that at the moment, but it doesn't mean it's not an interesting research question moving forward.
Thank you.
Councillor York.
Thank you. I appreciate all the work that goes into a data collection like this. It's often laborious, but also heartbreaking at the same time. So I
Yeah.
appreciate the amount of work that goes into it. Secondly, I wanted to inquire if you've been working, or if your group works at all with Ashley Ettinger, who works with the Kentville Police Service as the Community Crisis Navigator. As the town of Kentville's data specifically, I'm curious to see if there would be a change in those data points, because she works so closely with some of the most at-risk people in our community, if that would change things at all.
Yeah, happy to answer. So for further context, we did hold a engagement in October of 2022. Perhaps some of you were in that room. I know some of you out there were in that room. And that was an opportunity to bring folks like Ashley, who was there at the event, to share their experience within their community. What does housing look like? What does homelessness look like? But from an organization perspective, so the service providers, what are their barriers to support and et cetera? So she was in the room in that case, and Kentville Police was looped into this. This survey is only completed if someone is in direct communication in that particular month. So even if you have individuals that you're supporting and you know they're there, you cannot document it unless they've reached out to you within that month. So we didn't necessarily have data there, but it doesn't mean we can't connect and compile that for folks like yourself. There is more work to be done on this, and that would be a great avenue to help inform you of what's happening in your community so you're able to better address it.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Are there any further questions? All right, Alicia, thank you so much, and we look forward to the next iteration and when you want us to come together and hear more about this. So
Okay.
keep
We'll
us
see
in
you
the
then.
loop. All right, perfect. The directors have provided their reports for council review and will provide an update and receive questions from council. The reports will be presented and are part of the record of this meeting. Only items of new business arising from the reports will be taken for motion. And CAO Troke, could you please introduce our department reports and recommendations?
Sure. So tonight we'll start with finance. As council is aware, we have successfully hired our new director of finance. So this may be my last report on finance at CAC. So Wanda Matthews will be coming on board next Monday. So both the staff report and the projection reports are in your council package. We're at 93.4% of budget, which is just slightly above benchmark. Largely the adjustment is we have some bulk buying we do this time of year. We still continue to buy salt, even though there's well, there may be snow coming down on Tuesday, but, and so we still continue to buy ahead. So really what's happening is you're making purchases for March and April, and so that continues to be what at this point in time of the year on the charge side of things keeps you just slightly ahead of benchmark. On the projection report itself, I really just want to bring three particular items to council's attention. First of all, as you will see, we went from a surplus to a deficit situation kind of month to month. The principal reason, if we go back to September, council approved $50,000 worth of additional spending on essentially pothole repairs, some paving and whatnot. So that is going to come out of a reserve, but at that moment, the reserve doesn't hit our books till the end of the year. And so at this point in time, we have essentially the $50,000 worth of work that was approved in September has all been expensed through the system. So that's one item that is a change month to month. The second item is we received a bill from Nova Scotia Power for 21-22. So this was, we didn't get a streetlight power bill from them from last year, and we've just received it. So in paying it, that's a pressure on this year's number. So to give you a sense on 1 quarter billing for streetlights in the town of Kentville, it's $36,700. So you get it, you pay the bill. So that obviously is an item that we would have assumed would have been settled in 21-22. Wasn't, we just received it, and so therefore in paying it, put a pressure on our month-to-month charges. And then lastly, and a very similar situation, our third quarter billing for dispatch services, we did not receive from 21-22, and that too came through in this month. So that was for $21,500. So if you total those all up, we had 108.2 thousand go through, 50,000 of the incremental spending, which has already been approved by council, and then essentially we had 36.7 and 21.5 as bills that were actually from a previous year that have come through and now have been paid. So, and as we get into obviously the next parts of finance, where we approve various parts of bringing in capital reserves at the end of the year, 50,000 of this essentially will be an offset from a capital reserve. So essentially, the net operating deficit at this moment would be 14.3, and our efforts would be obviously at this point we still are very conservative in our forecasting. And we'd anticipate, barring any big changes, that would bring us to zero by the end of the year. But we will, and you'll see in the package tonight, we still do our blanket statement at the end of the year with regards to if we needed to bring in something from one of our operating reserves, we would use it to balance. So that's a quick overview and the three big items that are in there that I thought should be for council's attention.
Excellent. Thank you very much, CAO. And questions from our members of council? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. If I could direct through the chair.
Certainly.
CAO, under the operating fund, under budget versus actual, under the section other revenue owned sources, this is not on the forecast report, sorry, the projection report, but it's on the actuals versus budget. Under interest and penalties, there's a figure there of 92,000 under budget, and then it shows actual at 212. And then right underneath it, return on investment, it shows at 630,000 budgeted. And then under actual, it shows 100,000.
Okay.
And I'm thinking the return on investment might be the monies that we take out for the operating budget. Am I on the right track?
Yes.
Okay.
And of course, this year, the two pieces, I guess, that also come into play is that when the budget was put together, interest rates were basically, our borrowing through FCN, or
Right.
our borrowing through Municipal Finance
Right.
Corp was 1%.
Of course.
And so the change in that, and at any given time, obviously, there's not a lot of cash at play. But we do, when we would go out and go after a debenture, there is a lag between when you need the money
Right.
and when you actually go for the debenture. So basically, if you don't have at that moment in time a reserve or a cash flow to do it, then you would do some kind of a short-term finance.
Exactly. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Zabian.
Thank you. Through the chair, if I may.
Certainly.
CEO, just wondering, with the street light bill, is that a normal practice that we get it? Is it usually a lump sum like that, or do they bill them monthly, or?
So great question. It's done quarterly. And so it's one of those items that it's very rare to have something that would come from a previous year. And so if you were treating this as like a prior year adjustment, then you would automatically take it against a reserve. So last year, at the end of the year, we had a sizable surplus. And so that surplus would have been partially generated from the fact we didn't get a bill last year. But yeah, it's very unusual. And in fact, to have two bills come in from two different entities, that's incredibly unusual to have it happen.
And was there any follow-up just to ask them why, what happened?
The follow-up will go through. We literally just got them and paid them. But to your point, absolutely. And I think it's also one of those pieces where we, as in most municipalities, what happens is, for example, our street lights, it's not a metered item, it's just a bulk number. So if somebody on the other end, for lack of a better word, didn't send out a bill, they may not have picked it up and it may take a new person to pick it up.
Okay. Thank you.
No worries.
Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, and through the chair to the CAO.
Certainly.
Just looking at page 17, expenditures, general administration, and I'm noticing the difference there between the budgeted amount and the projected amount. And basically, the difference is that would be over $82,700. And I'm wondering why we would be that far over in the general administration.
Could I just get some clarity? I'm not sure what page you're looking at.
I think it's page 17. It's the expenditures,
What's your schedule?
operating fund,
Do you have a schedule number on it? At the top?
Should be a
top corner?
section.
schedule 1-3.
1-3.
Yep.
And the bottom line, you're saying the 64,000?
You've got legislative there under general admin, and you've got general admin under general admin. So I'm wondering why that discrepancy, saying we're over 4.6%, why that discrepancy? What's chewing up that money there?
I'll get back to you on that and give you the specifics. I don't have the details of that in front of me, but I'm happy to send an email out to council and let them know.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any further questions with regards to these two reports? None? All right, CAO, can we move on to the sand sewer resolution, please?
Absolutely. Okay, so we have a resolution to withdraw from sanitary sewer. There's two items. So this is a memo prepared by the Acting Director of Finance, Robin Parrish. So the 22-23 sanitary sewer capital provides partial funding of capital acquisitions from sanitary sewer depreciation reserve fund. One of the capital projects ran over the budget allocation requiring funding as noted below. In addition, a project was added for necessary equipment need to be purchased. And these are the details. So Brayside, McDonald, there's a $11,840.16, and pumps, $9,112.40. And folks would have heard Director Bell talking about, we now, when it comes to pumps, make sure we have a backup on the shelf. So anytime that one will go down, we're making sure now that we're having essentially two, so one's on the shelf due to order delays and whatnot. So that would be something that wasn't a budget item. And again, this is sanitary sewer, so you're talking about what's in the ground. So the depreciation reserve for sanitary sewer was at $191,209. And after this withdrawal, if approved, we'd be at $170,256. So I recommend to Council Advisory Committee that $20,952.56 be withdrawn from the sanitary sewer depreciation reserve.
Thank you, CAO. And the motion would be that CAC recommend approval to council for withdrawal of $20,952.56 from the sanitary sewer depreciation fund at the March 27th meeting of council. Someone could move that, please. Deputy Mayor, thank you. Councillor York for the second. It has been moved and seconded that CAC recommend approval to council for the withdrawal of $20,952.56 from the sanitary sewer depreciation fund at the March 27th meeting of council. Is there any discussion on this matter? There being no discussion, are you ready for the question? The question is on approval of the motion to recommend approval to council for the withdrawal of $20,952.56 from the sanitary sewer depreciation fund at the March 27th meeting of council. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed. And the motion is carried. Thank you very much. CAO?
So our next item is our withdrawal from town capital reserve. So this is draw number 3 for the fiscal year. Outlined in the memo, you will see areas of transportation, recreation, and economic development. Town of Kentville Capital Reserve general allocation contains $1,683,560 after a withdrawal of $86,181.34. Will contain $1,597,379. So I recommend to Council Advisory Committee the attached resolution be approved for withdrawal of $86,181.34 from the Town of Kentville Capital Reserve General Allocation.
Thank you, CAO, and the motion would be that CAC recommend approval to council for the withdrawal of $86,181.34 from the Town of Kentville Capital Reserve General Allocation Fund at the March 27th meeting of council. If someone could move that, please. Councillor Maxwell, thank you. And the seconder? Councillor Huntley, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that CAC recommend approval to council for the withdrawal of $86,181.34 from the Town of Kentville Capital Reserve General Allocation Fund at the March 27th meeting of council. Is there any discussion on this matter? Are you ready for the question? The question is on approval of the motion to recommend approval to council for withdrawal of $86,181.34 from the Town of Kentville Capital Reserve General Allocation Fund at the March 27th meeting of council. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed. And the motion is carried. Thank you very much. CAO?
Thank you. So as years gone by, we put forward a resolution this time of year for a blanket withdrawal from the Town of Kentville Operating Reserve. So the request is made to mitigate any Town of Kentville operating deficit positions as of March 31st. Finance is at the very beginning of the year-end process quantifying accruals and deferrals. However, the final position of the town will not be fully assessed until mid-June of 2023. If the town operating fund is in a deficit position after the completion of the year-end process, the deficit figure must be the first line item in the 23-24 Town of Kentville operating budget. So as municipalities are not permitted to carry deficits, an operating deficit position would also affect the town's fiscal condition index for 22-23. So the town can eliminate any potential year-end deficit by passing of a blanket resolution that permits transfer of funds from the town's operating reserve to offset any shortfall. The town's operating reserve fund general allocation contains $481,285 as of March 8, 2023. I recommend to the Council Advisory Committee to approve a blanket resolution for a possible withdrawal from the Town of Kentville Operating Reserve in the amount of any current operating deficit should one occur on March 31st. After all year-end transactions are quantified, these funds would be transacted only if the town was facing a current operating deficit at the end of the year.
Thank you, CAO. And if we take that as a motion, that CAC recommend to the March 27th, 2023 council meeting for approval of a blanket resolution for a possible withdrawal from the Town of Kentville operating reserve in the amount of any current operating deficit should one occur at March 31st, 2023 after all year-end transactions are quantified. If someone could move that, please. Councillor York, thank you. And for the second, Deputy Mayor, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that CAC recommend to the March 27, 2023 council meeting for approval of a blanket resolution for a possible withdrawal from the Town of Kentville operating reserve in the amount of any current operating deficit should one occur at March 31st, 2023 after all year-end transactions are quantified. Is there any discussion on this matter? There being no discussion, are you ready for the question? The question is that CAC recommend to the March 27, 2023 council meeting for approval of a blanket resolution for a possible withdrawal from the Town of Kentville operating reserve in the amount of any current operating deficit should one occur at March 31st, 2023 after all year-end transactions are quantified. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed. And the motion is carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, CAO. All right, moving right along to planning and development, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce our acting development officer, Ms. Duncan. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, Council. You've received our planning and development staff report as part of your package this evening, so I'm just going to be hitting on some of the highlights. We have issued 3 development permits in the month of February with a total building valuation of just over $214,000. We have received 1 new subdivision application this month, and it has been sent for final approval with the Land Registration Office. Our department continues to field a high volume of inquiries of interested parties looking to relocate or open new businesses within the town limits of Kentville. Additionally, we have been going through some budget planning for capital and operating budgets. We're working through them. The capital numbers for 2023, 2024 projects have been submitted to our finance department. In addition to that, the lease agreement between the Kentville Lions Club and the town of Kentville is, on River Street is up for renewal. The draft is currently with the Lions Executive Group, and once it's ready, will come to council for your review and approval. Looking forward to the summer months, we're looking at hiring staff for the VIC. This will potentially be our last season for our longtime manager, Susan. This summer, we're looking to hire an assistant manager or a manager in training, in addition to our part-time counselor to prepare for succession. And carrying on the theme of summer, we're also reviewing the current patio and sidewalk cafe policy, looking to bring that into alignment with our accessibility requirements in the downtown. And then I want to highlight some tourism and special events that we have listed here in our report. So the Multicultural Festival is back this year. The KBC is supporting a new Kentville Multicultural Festival committee that will be getting started with planning for this summer. In addition to that, a draft agreement has been sent to the Apple Blossom Festival Board for their review, and we will be facilitating a Black-owned business pop-up event on Apple Blossom Saturday within Center Square. This event was a great success in 2022, and we really look forward to bringing this back. Some other projects that are ongoing, the Vita Living project, as you all have heard about, is ongoing. We haven't yet received any permit applications for the buildings, but they are up there working on the site. In addition to that, Encore development is still ongoing. The developers have reached out to chat about a revised site plan approval. We still have not received anything yet, but that's still ongoing. Our municipal floodline mapping project, we've received a draft report and some draft maps so far, and everything's looking great. The project's moving forward in a timely manner and is expected to wrap up at the end of March 2023 this month, as expected. The one last thing that I'd really like to touch on is that staff have begun just looking at our site plan approval section of our planning documents, and we'll be drafting some amendments to come forward at a later meeting. And for now, that is the highlights within our report, and if you have any questions.
All right, thank you very much. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Kirsten on a very well-presented report.
Thank you.
Good job. Either Kirsten may be able to answer this question or CAO. I'm just wondering how many site plan revisions that have occurred over the years with Encore development. It seems to me that there's been a lot of site plan revisions, so.
So I can speak to that.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So we received a first plan in the very early stages of Encore, which had a great layout. But since then, our housing situation has changed. And so we've been working with them over the past few months to make sure that they have all the documents submitted that's required to revise this site plan. This would be our first revision that would be submitted, but we've just been bringing it up at previous meetings because it's been kind of ongoing for a while.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
Are there any further questions? Okay, Councillor Zabian.
Thank you, Mayor Snow. Just for clarity, Kirsten, you did a great job. Nice to see somebody here from the department.
Thank you.
Encore bought that in 2018, correct? From the
I'm
town
not
of
familiar on the timelines. I haven't looked into it lately, but
Yeah,
I
it was
think it's around that
2018,
time.
and we're now in 2023, so we're way past their deadline. I apologize if anybody thinks I'm in a conflict, but I just wanted to just put that out there so that we're way behind, and I think, I'm glad to see it coming, and I hope it's done soon, but I think this council's been more than lenient But anyway, it's progressing, so hopefully people will be moving in soon. Thank you.
All right, are there any further questions for Ms. Duncan? None? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten.
All right, our next report is, again, another acting director, and Mr. Langell is here to report on Parks and Recreation. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Council. So I just wanted to focus on kind of three key areas. The first one being administrative and operations under Homeless No More. So as Alicia had presented earlier, the Homeless No More Group Committee has scheduled a tentative date for a political engagement session. Thursday, May 25th, presentation will be held for decision makers that focus on solutions to address homelessness in the Annapolis Valley. And another key point is the Homeless No More initiative has funding until the end of March, at which point there will be no dedicated staff supporting this initiative. So we'll be looking at ways to hopefully be able to support this going forward. Under facilities and operations, the arena, the last day of operations is March 31st, sorry. The arena continues to operate at capacity. We're starting to book off-season rentals, so special events. We have the home show that's coming April 21st to 23rd. That's in partnership with the Darwin Group. Last month, we were already at 90% capacity for the booths. And then the arena, the hours are beginning to reduce. So we're having some of our bigger groups starting to leave our facilities. So our hours are going to start reducing over the next couple weeks. In regards to community outreach and events, this last item is the 2023 Canadian Championship for mountain biking. We have the organizing committee continues to bring in sponsors for the Kenful Championships. So we want to thank all the businesses in town and surrounding areas that are dedicating resources, whether that's financial or in kind contributions. It is very appreciated. And we're seeking ACOA funding, so the Atlantic Canadian Opportunity Agency, to hopefully be able to offer some special events that will partner with the KBC, Kenful Business Community, to ensure that they're involved in participating in the event for this year and following next year as well, because there's 2 years that we have this event. That is the end of my highlights. Any questions?
Excellent, thank you very much. Are there any questions for Mr. Langell? Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. Again, great report. Good to see you. Again, you may not be able to answer these questions, but with the Canada Cup, there's quite a jump between the actual budget amount and what we're looking at. I'm wondering if there's a grant outside of ACOA, and is that amount going to be raised through ACOA fundraising, KBC? Is there anything outside of that, any other grant that you know of that we've applied for?
Yeah, sure, I can answer that. So looking at our detailed budget as we are now, we're about $15,000 for a deficit for the event if we were to host it. That's where our sport hosting grant comes into play. So there's $5,000 there from Sport Nova Scotia. There's also a COA that we're hoping that we could be able to solidify the remaining funds and hopefully maybe even have a little bit of profit off the event that we could go and put towards next year as well.
Okay, thank you. And my other question was, I noticed a pretty big jump between professional fees from a budget amount of $500 to $8,000. I'm wondering why such a big jump in professional fees. Do you have any idea why that's listed like that?
For
The professional fees?
For Canada Cup?
No, this would just be for recreation.
We do a lot, or maybe in regards to training. So we put our staff through.
No, there's an amount for training. Through the chair to CAO, do you have any idea why that's?
I'll take a look at the line and get back to you on it. But I know that in reaching out, so Director Benfield is away on vacation at the moment. I know she'll have the answer at her fingertips.
Yep, thank you. Thanks.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship. Hi, Craig.
Hi.
Thanks for your report. It's great to see you. Under the Homeless No More, so the engagement session on the 25th of May, what does that look like for attendance? I'm assuming you've reached out provincially and having other partners come and attend that.
The date might actually be in June now,
Okay.
to update that, and attendance, we're still sorting out what that might look like, given the space we have.
Okay.
We also have Olivia in the room with us, who's playing a big part in putting that together, so the details in terms of attendance are to be determined, but definitely expecting, our last engagement had over 60, and it could likely be double that.
Exactly, and then when you talk about the initiative, the funding ends at the end of March, what does that look like moving forward to extend that?
Yeah,
Or maybe that's coming in the budget, I don't know.
Yes, so from my discussions with Director Bedingfield, it was hopefully being able to try some funding, find
Yeah.
some funding through the province,
Yeah.
and then being able to supplement some of the funds through the town of Kentville as well.
Hopefully, it's
Yeah.
pretty important, so.
I agree.
Thank you, yeah, thank you.
Are there any further questions with regards to our Parks and Recreation report? None? All right, thank you very much, Craig.
Thank you.
Our next report is our police report. Chief, did you want to take the podium?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. You should have access to our January Board of Police Commissioner reports as well as our February reports. We would have met and discussed the January reports already. The February reports would have gone to the board. They've probably seen them, but we haven't had a chance to discuss them. Our operating and capital budget requests have already gone to the board. So on that note, I guess, is there any questions on anything you've had so far from police?
Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. Hi, Chief.
Aye.
I was looking through the budget, and I was just noticing that at this point, we're over 70,900, but I was looking at the overtime for sergeants and constables
Yes.
being 107,000. I'm just wondering, why so much overtime? Like, why are we getting such a large jump in overtime?
There's a couple of reasons. We've had some staff off for long-term illness, so whenever their coworkers are off, one of them are off, we have to backfill. And one of the decisions I've made this past year and a half or so, when a sergeant's off, I try to backfill with a sergeant. So it's a little bit more money to pay a sergeant, but I believe supervision is important, so when a sergeant's off, I try to get a sergeant in. The other driver for the cost was Apple Blossom. So you'll see probably about $7,200 there for overtime. That's not budgeted in any previous operating budget. So that comes out of the overtime budget. In the next budget, it is actually a line item for special events, so that would be separate.
Okay.
But that's some of the drivers for the overtime budget.
Okay, and one more question.
Sure.
I noticed a Department of Justice $6,300 expenditure. What would that be for?
That was, I believe we actually received that. Can you, it's not an expenditure, I think it was something we received.
Oh, was it?
Now,
Okay.
we do send money to the Public Prosecution Service every year
Yeah.
as part of a payment, and corrections as well. But I think the $6,300 was something received from Department of Justice as a result of the drug recognition expert training, where we get refunded for it. And we
Okay.
just didn't get it last year when we expected it, so we got it this year, I believe is the number you're talking about.
Great. Thank you very much.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. Hi, Chief, just a quick question, and
Sure.
I know we as a council haven't seen our operating budget yet, that's to be coming, but should we assume that there's going to be an allotment in there for the Community Crisis Navigator?
Yes,
Yay. Okay, great, thank you.
you're welcome.
Are there any further questions for the chief? None? Thank you very much, Chief. Oh, never mind. Councillor Maxwell, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that it was nice to see an increase in the foot patrols.
Perfect.
So the hours
I'd like to
there.
hear that. Thank you.
Yes, that I took particular note of, so
All right.
thank you.
All right. And next is Engineering and Public Works with Director Bell.
Thank you, Mayor Snow. Good evening, Council. I'll start as I do every month with an update with the Kentville Water Commission. Nothing much to report. In February, we had a couple of water breaks, which is typical during the winter months, even though this hasn't really been a typical winter weather-wise. But other than that, February was operationally uneventful for the Water Commission with a few new residential service connections. Similarly, the sanitary sewer service, there were no operational issues. Everything was working as expected. Under Public Works, the month of February and so far in March, our Public Works crew has had a bit more winter weather to contend with than the first half of the snow and ice season. We still expect a small surplus in our snow and ice budget due to the late start of winter, but this will be offset by extra expense incurred for maintenance and repair of our aging fleet and of vehicles and equipment. That segues into an update on the tendering and replacement of our oldest salt plow truck and the associated dump body and plow and wing gear that was pre-approved to order by council back in the fall. We have both of those tenders out now, one closing later this week and the other next week. Assuming these come in within budget, the delivery is still 6+ months from the time of order, depending on availability. An update on Canaan Avenue. A section of Canaan Avenue, as we're all aware, has been closed since mid-January due to a slope failure, losing a section of sidewalk and guardrail and making that section unsafe to vehicle traffic. A geotechnical and engineering investigation is scheduled for later this month, with recommendations that I should have for our next month's CAC to advise of the recommendations. Traffic Authority, there's nothing to report this month. And under projects, as mentioned last month, field survey work and preliminary design is now underway for the 2023-24 capital projects to be ready for the upcoming construction season. And that is my brief report for February. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And questions? Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Director Bell. In the past, I have asked you about the blinking lights that Wolfville has next to the gymnasium, and I love them. They're solar, they're eye-catching. But in recent trips through Wolfville and Berwick, they have reflective tape just on the pole on either side of crosswalks, especially crosswalks that aren't
Signalized.
well lit or lit at all. Is that something we could entertain getting?
I think so. I've seen them certainly in Berwick, as you mentioned, where they have a lot of crossings that aren't signalized at all. So they have them on just the poles themselves that do draw the attention. Most of our poles that are the larger RA5 overheads are large diameter poles. Could be effective, I guess. You know, the benefit of our overhead ones, they do light the intersection as well. We are going to try our first strobe one this summer as part of the AT project, crossing Cornwallis from Station Lane, or from, I guess, back and forth Station to Justice Way. So we're going to have a strobe set there that we've already purchased and ordered, so waiting to be installed. But I will look into the
And I'm thinking
stripe.
like, you know, down Klondike, where, you know, the ones that
aren't,
if you didn't know the area,
that aren't lit,
you
essentially.
wouldn't have any idea that there was a crosswalk
Nope,
there.
absolutely. Look into that.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions for the director? Getting off easy tonight.
Very easy. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Director Bell. All right, CAO, time for your report.
Thank you, Mayor Snow, Council. So first of all, some time ago, we started talking about the Property Assessed Clean Energy Program. The acronym is PACE. And so a joint application between West Hants and Kentville had gone into FCM, Federation of Canadian Municipalities, to develop a program, options for council to consider, and basically look at training for staff. So that application to FCM has been successful. So the combined West Hants Kentville funding request has been approved up to $168,800. This is to develop, create the options for council's consideration, and then should council move ahead, helps with training. So that's been kind of floating around for a little bit, so we're at that point now we can press the go button on getting the package together, so it'll be coming back for council. So a good success there. Staff have been working on a number of policies. Craig Langer will be talking about the urban forest bylaw today. But a number of these, we're hoping to be bringing them in for council for some feedback. The joint council meeting with regards to regional facilities has occurred, and so the report is, or the presentation is available online. Regional sewer, there's a joint working group that has been formed, which is looking at the allocation of new assets. So as different assets come online, there needs to be a decision around if or how they will be allocated to the sewage treatment system or the sewage treatment plant. And there's also some work ongoing between the town of Kentville and Kings, particularly with regards to the distribution system. As folks are aware, the distribution system that we are tied on to take our sewage to the plant is Colebrook, Kentville, and then through to the plant. So there's some analysis that is needed, so we're going to be queuing that work up for 23, 24, but there's some discussions kind of underway with Kings on that. And then the REN has met with regards to the audit committee. Happy to say that our auditors, Kent and Duffett, now are doing the work for REN with regards to their audit. So they've been brought in with a 3-year engagement. And that's some quick updates for council.
Thank you very much, CAO. And are there questions? Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Worship. When you mentioned PACE, CAO Troke, it made me think of the Annapolis title. Is there any update?
So that project was declined by FCM. So there was no contributions made from the town. It was only if it was successful. And I don't have a lot of details other than I don't believe it hit enough of the check marks for that proposal to go forward, and that was through FCM.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Maxwell.
Well, thank you, and through the chair to the CAO. I was saving this question for community economic development, but we didn't get maybe I should have asked Kirsten, I don't know, but could I address that with you now? So I was going through that budget, and I noticed we were over 28,500. I noticed that promotions were up almost 33,000. And is there a quick answer as to what it is, why we're up over 33?
Yeah, I think, and I'm going to say there's a couple of things. First of all, promotional activities cost more money, and so that's some of it. But the other part is we've been doing a little bit more with regards to specific advertising. So, for example, even during the Pumpkin People, we were spending a little bit more time advertising on the radio in Halifax, getting folks in. And so that doesn't count for all of it, but I can say those are some of the things that I know are driving that particular line item up.
Okay, and then I noticed that we're having a $4,000 drop in support for the Apple Blossom Festival. Why is that happening?
I don't have specifics as to why that specific amount, but I also know that a couple of things, and as the chief alluded to, our support for Apple Blossom comes in a lot of different ways, including things like our overtime budget for police, our budgets for public works, and so on. So a lot of budgets kind of get moved around, and they're not, as opposed to a positive revenue from us to Apple Blossom, a lot of times it's more time or it's no more support in kind. And so I can't give you the specific on that number, but I know the budget overall is relatively the same.
Okay, I would like a little bit more, if you can give it to
Yeah.
me, because I think it's important to our community, and it is the one big event that Kentville does. And so I would like a little more information on why we're cutting back on the Apple Blossom Festival.
Sure, and again, I don't believe there's a cutting back. I think there's a redistribution, but I'm happy to get that information for you.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any further questions for the CAO? All right, CAO, you also included a report for Mentoring Plus update. So those details are in our package. Was there anything?
I think the lead for Mentoring Plus covered that in his comments, but also if ever there is any information, please reach out to myself and happy to go back to Gordon if there's anything specific.
All right, and CAO, we do have an extra CAC meeting planned for the 20th of March. Have we got anything on the agenda at this point in time?
I don't have anything specific, but like similar times, if folks could let me know by Wednesday, and then I can let folks know whether we're going to release the date or not.
All right, so that is the 15th of March for that CAC meeting on the 20th of March. So staff reports have been presented and are now part of the record of this meeting. Staff, thank you very much for your time this evening. I realize that some of you are hanging out because we have other presentations. But for those of you who are headed out, thank you very much, and we'll see you tomorrow. Moving right along to our unfinished business, the first matter that we have is the KBC agreement. And CAO, can you update us on the agreement, the funding envelope, and previous budgeted amounts for KBC?
Can do. So thank you, Mayor Snow. So council, we've had some discussions in the past around KBC, both what we collect, what their contributions have been. And so Lindsay has been working both with our solicitor and getting information from KBC. And before you is a draft document. This was basically based on some previous agreements as a guide. The terms and the language have been updated to align with the current priorities and deliverables KBC has in their strategic plan. And so this was really created for council's discussion. The document is intended to be a 3-year funding envelope with year 1 to be a bit of a catch-up. And the reason for that is that there are 2 items that I am aware of that KBC has funded in the last 2 previous years that are items that they, I'm going to say, either could have or in fact may have come to council, and there's a bit of a catch-up. So to give you some example, typically the town will collect through its tax revenue about 113 to 114,000, specifically targeting the efforts of KBC. So what that usually looks like is about an $88,000 operational budget and a $25,000 facade program budget, plus the ability for KBC to come back looking for any special event funding. So in total, that's about 113,000. This year's budget, there was an escalator, so those numbers were increased. But I do know that, for example, there have been, in last year, the facade funding, KBC delivered, I believe, just over 25,000 in facade funding. But the town's contribution to KBC was just the operational money. So there was a gap there, and whether it was they didn't request or it didn't flow or how it worked. So what we've done here is, and again, these numbers in here, please, these are for discussion. They're going to get refined a little bit more. But the intent here is that year 1 of a 3-year agreement that would start in April of 2023, year 1 would be a bit of a catch-up to deal with some of those outstanding receivables that KBC has, and these were items that they could have and maybe should have come to the town. But there's also a case, for example, I know where KBC requested $10,000 in additional funding for a special programming. It was approved, and that money's never flowed through to KBC. So there are some gaps here. And we want to say maybe that's a function of not having agreements in a few years have created those gaps. Maybe it's also a function in some changes in folks who, from an invoicing perspective and then a payment perspective, it wasn't as smooth as it should have been. So this type of an agreement, when you look at it, creates stable and predictable funding. It's very specific. And again, the numbers in here, there is some ability to look at refining that. But this agreement in itself, I believe, would give us 3 years of stable, predictable funding with KBC. And it would also mean that there is no requirement then for invoicing or requests for special funding, that the strategic plan as KBC has today, they could carry it out knowing this would be the backbone behind that strategic plan.
Thank you, CAO. So based on what you've said to us, is that CAC to put this in a motion so we can have some discussion on it, is that CAC recommends approval to council at the March 27, 2023 council meeting of the 3-year KBC agreement as detailed in the attached KBC funding agreement, and further annual funding amounts will be established at the meeting of council. If someone could move that, please. Deputy Mayor, thank you. Councillor York for the second, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that CAC recommend approval to council at the March 27, 2023 meeting of a 3-year KBC agreement as detailed in the attached KBC funding agreement, and further annual funding amounts will be established at the meeting of council. Is there any discussion on this matter? Councillor Zabian.
Thank you. I don't have their financials in front of me. Do we know, I guess, so through the chair or to Deputy Mayor Savage, what their reserves are, KBC's reserves are?
I do know that there is a receivable on their books for the facade program from essentially last year. And on the reserve side, I do know that there is positive cash, but it's also cash that I believe has commitments against it.
Okay.
But certainly we can get the specific details and bring them back.
Yeah.
But I know there is a relatively large receivable on their books to the town.
Okay, thank you. The only thing I'm not comfortable with here myself is the termination without cause, that we have to give a year's notice. So we're kind of stuck in this, I don't want to say stuck, I mean, you always hope for the, the best, and they're doing a great job, but things do change, and so we have to give them a year's notice before we can essentially stop the relationship, correct? Yeah, that's the only thing I'm not, that's a lot of money, and I think, right now there's a great team there, but as we know, things change and dynamics change, so that's something I would probably like to look at. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. And just to comment on a couple of things that the CAO said, in terms of that receivable that they had set up on their balance sheet last year that for whatever reason didn't get invoiced, there was a mix-up with that. And then some other, special programming funding, the 10,000 that they had undertaken, that they didn't collect, from the town as well. And I think, look, at the end of the day, we're collecting this levy from the residents, we're collecting it commercially, we're collecting it with the industrial levy as well. I think KBC has certainly proven themselves. I think their strategic plan is excellent. It's very robust. They have been going great guns for the last number of years, and they have had various changes in the board of directors, and they're very consistent with that plan. It follows from year to year to year. So I feel very comfortable with it. I like the idea that there's an escalation clause in there. I know it's the funding contribution 2.5% per year, which hopefully will be back in line with what CPI is, but who knows? We'll see as time goes on. But I like that idea. I like the fact that it's in place till 2026, because that means, whatever the new council looks like in 2024, that they won't have to be revisiting this agreement for another year or so. So well done on the agreement. I like it, and I think they'll be quite pleased with it. Knowing also that, once we do our operating budget, we'll probably have a better idea on what those numbers look like, but the numbers in the agreement I was fine with as well. So, thank you. Great job on that.
Thank you. Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Worship. I'm just wondering if we can ask KDCL, and it doesn't have to come back to a council meeting, but ask KDCL for a breakdown of the facade money funds. Just curious as to how that's being spent. Thank you.
Councillor York.
Thank you. And could probably be confirmed through our solicitor as well. I assume the 1-year termination clause would be an industry standard and a professional courtesy to allow KBC or KDCL to find other funding sources should we decide to terminate our agreement with them. I would assume that's just a standard for the industry or similar.
I'm not aware of a standard. This 12-month notice works both ways. One is for perhaps a future council's benefit, who might have different policy ideas than a current council, and thus it doesn't tie future councils to this arrangement, but at the same time provides, I believe, I'm speaking for others here, provides what was considered to be a reasonable notice period so that KBC could do those things that you indicated, Councillor York. KBC might have contractual obligations to employees and others that it needs to know how long it's got funding for, and a year might not be enough without reserves set aside for those sorts of liabilities. So clearly, those entities that are relying on your funding, if they are truly relying on it, they would have requirements for the minimum amount of time that they would need. So hopefully KBC's looked at that clause in particular.
Thank you.
Are there is there any further discussion on this matter? Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, and I'll just throw this question out there, I don't really care who answers it. We're using the term KBC, and then we're also using the term KDCL. Should we not be consistent all the way through?
That's an easy answer. I don't think you'll find KBC anywhere in that document. The legal name is Kentfield Development Corporation Limited and always has been, and it's not changed. They just have a business operating name that they use. It's Kentfield Business Community.
Okay, maybe we should change that in our stuff. Anyway, 2.5% increase to funding each year. Where's that coming from? Is that coming from the taxpayers? Is that coming from the business taxation? Who's paying that 2.5% each year?
I'm seeing eyes cast in my direction, which is the only reason I'm standing here to answer this question. As I understand how the money is collected, it's calculated on the base rate on the taxation. So if assessments go up in the commercial district, those aren't capped like residential assessments. So if they go up 2.5% or more, you're getting that money.
Right.
And so this helps ensure that those funds flow through to KBC. If assessments go up more than 2.5%, and I think the average in the province was 7, if I'm not mistaken. I think that was commercial was 7, wasn't it? In any event, whatever it was more than 2.5% the last year. So that would account for it. If assessments didn't go up by more than 2.5%, then it's either coming out of your general tax revenues or you're increasing how much you're collecting pursuant to that levy.
Okay, so that makes sense to me. So if the assessments didn't go up at all, then I wouldn't like to see a 2.5% lift. And maybe we could write something like that in, that if the assessments go up, then we'll lift by 2.5%. If the assessments don't, if they stay the same, then there would be no lift in that year.
Yep.
All right.
If I might, Your Worship, I just want to make a comment only because Lindsay and I spoke about this, and this is up to council as to how you want to address it. There was thought that if there was a year in which assessments increased more than 2.5%, then that perhaps might be a windfall to KBC that it didn't need. And there would be the opportunity, of course, for council to reduce the amount you're collecting in tax on this, as opposed to collect it all. That would be up to council at the time to look at the needs of KBC and how much you actually need to collect. So that could go up or down depending on the actual needs. But the agreement provides for the 2.5%, and for more detail on that, I suggest you have to ask Lindsay.
Okay, thank you, solicitors. So, Councillor Maxwell, you're suggesting that paragraph 3.1 C be amended? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so how about if you move that amendment?
Well, I'd like to ask another question if I could just before we do that.
Okay, go
So
ahead.
if the assessments go up by quite a bit, now, I'm assuming that some of this assessment money would come to the town. Not all the taxation for businesses is going to KDCL. So, I mean, we have work to do on sidewalks that are in front of our businesses. We have work to do with roads in front of our businesses and things like that. I would assume that we would get, that some of that taxation would be coming back to the town. So I'm just looking at the 2.5% each fiscal year. If it's flat, what's the likelihood of that being? Then yes, I would like an amendment.
Okay, so do you want to deal with your amendment first, or do you want to deal with your last statement?
I'd just like an answer if some of
Okay,
our
so-
taxation money is going to,
So your
into general
last
coffers.
statement is, this is a special levy.
Yeah.
So it is not general operating. It is a special levy that is specific for the economic development of our downtown through KDCL. So their services. If we had a big lift, then I'm sure there's some way that we could probably put it as money in the bank. And then, as you say, in that flat year, we use it then. I mean, that's what we do with other things, is we keep money in reserves when it turns out we have extra. However, it wouldn't go into general revenue to, as you say, fix a sidewalk.
So what would happen if we didn't have a KDCL and we would still be collecting taxation from our businesses? Where would that go?
No, we wouldn't collect this special levy. If there was no KDCL, this special levy would go away.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. Okay, thank you. Well, we'll just do the amendment then.
So you wish to move an amendment on the funding contributions that okay, I have to get this right. So your amendment would be that it's that, however, in years where it is less than?
In years that the assessment is flat, there's no increase in assessment,
Okay.
then there would be no 2.5% lift in that year.
No change. Okay, so you are moving that?
Yes.
Okay, do we have someone to second that?
I'll second it.
Okay. So it has been moved and seconded that we make an amendment to paragraph 3.1C to state that in years where there is no increase in assessment, that there is no increase in the contribution to KDCL. Is there any discussion on this matter? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. So when these agreements first commenced, I don't know how many years ago now it would be, I'm looking at Craig. It's probably about eight or 10 years ago when we started the agreements. And we had an allocation in there for increases on an annual basis. I'm thinking it was somewhere around 3.5%, but it might have been 2.5%, but it was at least 2.5%. So if we look at the lift that we've had in our assessments year over year, just in the last 2 years, it's averaging out about 7 to 8%. So in all likelihood, we'd have a residual anyway. We'd have a reserve. We're probably, based on the levy that we have, we're not going to allocate that all to KDCL in any case. So I'm comfortable leaving it in. I was comfortable with it in the first agreement. I think it made a lot of sense. And at the end of the day, with the lifts that we've been getting over the last couple of years, we're probably not going to dispense it all anyway to KBCL. So I'm comfortable leaving it in. So I can't support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Zabian.
Actually, my light was on before. I have a comment unrelated to that.
No,
so-
you're, I have it in order.
Oh, no, but I had a question before. I think you just missed me. I had a question before she made that amendment.
No?
Yeah, no, I did, I haven't pushed it, you can go back and watch me, I pushed it a couple minutes ago. I'll wait till this is done, and then I have a question unrelated to that.
Okay, so is there any further discussion on the amendment of paragraph 31C? Counselor Maxwell?
Thank you. I understand what the deputy mayor is saying here. However, I don't like to work with assumptions, and so that's why I put forth this amendment. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. Is there any further discussion on this matter? Are you ready for the question? The question is on amending paragraph 3.1C to include in the years where there is no increase in assessment, there would be no increase to the funding contribution to KDCL. And voting is now open.
Sorry, I'm just wondering, can you just repeat that question for me, please?
Okay,
What we're voting on?
you're voting on whether or not to put the amendment in. So if you vote yes, you want it amended. If you vote no, you don't want the paragraph amended.
Thank you.
Voting is now closed. And that motion fails. Thank you. All right, Councillor Zabian, you had something you want to add.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Snow. I'd like to make an amendment to the term of it. I think we should continue to do these annually. I don't think we should, as the solicitor said too, I mean, that's a good point. We're kind of tying this up into the next council that could come in here, and it could be all of us, who knows? But to tie up in around $300,000 over the next couple of years, I don't think that's fair. We don't know. Like I said, I prefer the annual thing. We've always done that, and I don't see an issue with that. And I'd be more comfortable kind of knowing each year what they're gonna do than kind of just saying here, we've pre-approved this and on you go. So I'd like to make an amendment that we continue giving them the money annually. So thank you.
Thank you. So you are looking for an amendment to paragraph 3.1A, where it talks about the annual contribution subject to the adjustments, blah, 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 during each of the 3 fiscal years commencing April 1st, 2023 and ending March 31st, 2023. So what you're asking for is that states annually.
Well, it would be, yeah, well, it would be ending 2024. You said 2023 for both of them, so April 1st until April.
No, I was reading what was written there, so what I'm saying is that your amendment takes the line during each of the 3 fiscal years commencing April 1st to 2023 and ending March 31st, 2026. That would be stricken and the
Correct.
word would be annual.
Correct.
Solicitor?
Just wanted to comment, I think it's a much more wholesale change than that. Much of the agreement will change as a result of this. And so the motion from a legal perspective need not be limited to the language in the agreement because I think there will have to be wholesale changes if this changes to an annual agreement.
Okay, so what you're saying is that our motion would not be paragraph specific. It would be against the agreement, that it would become an annual agreement vice a 3-year agreement. Is that correct? Is that the best
It'd be
way?
an annual agreement, and then
So I don't have to
think
say
it'd go
3
back
years?
to staff to make changes and come back.
Okay, so the amendment would be that this agreement, this KDCL agreement becomes an annual agreement. Does that suit your needs? You're moving that?
I am.
And a seconder? Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that the KDCL agreement be modified to be an annual agreement. Is there any discussion on this matter? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. Initially, when we started doing these agreements with KDCL, the first one was a 4-year agreement, and then we started going to annual agreements. I think that was probably because we had a change in council, but I think the 4 years provides, the 3-year provide some consistency for them, to know that they're gonna have those, the funding coming in. You know, we're collecting the levy, our residents and the business community is used to those levies now. They've provided us with a strategic plan, again, to use my terminology from before, it's quite robust. They've been following through with everything. I won't be supporting the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor York.
Thank you. I think KBC, KDCL have been doing, and we have commented on the work that they've been doing and the growth that we see in the town as a result, a direct result of the work that they do. I think switching this to an annual agreement is patronizing to a group that has continuously showed us year over year the amount of growth, the amount of effort, and for them to be able to plan, for them to be able to continue the execution of the work that they've set out to do through their strategic plans. I think the only way for them to move forward in any sort of meaningful way would be for us to lend our support in a multi-year agreement. And I won't be able to support this, this amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Zabian.
Thank you, Mayor Snow. Just for clarity, they've been operating on a one-year agreement for like the last 6 or 7 years, and they've done a great job in the last 2 or 3 years. So this isn't going to change. I would hope not, going to change their level of service to the community. The other thing, though, and I've been in town for 10 years now as a business owner and on this council, and I've seen different variations of KBC and KDCL, and there's been good years and not so good. And I can speak that just from watching around town, and these guys have done an amazing job, but we've seen different varieties there. So I'm not understanding why you would want to tie up a couple $100,000 of money again, how you're getting it, whether it's a levy that taxpayers are still paying the $300,000, why you'd want to tie it up for 3 years and then tie it up into a next council that's going to be here when it's been operating annually. We've been giving them this money every year. They've come in, they've done a presentation, they've had their ask, we've given them the money with no problem, and they've just grown as we've gone along. So not understanding why this change is it's a change for them, it's not a change for us. We've done the same thing, so not understanding how this is going to change their structure at all. They've been doing a great job for the last 2 years or 3 years now, so I don't understand why you'd want to tie up money for 3 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. I'm just, I feel pretty much the same as Councillor Zabian there. I don't understand the necessity of going on a 3 or 4 year plan ahead. We have been getting along okay with an annual budget. I would like that part explained a little bit to me, but I think that we've only got 1 year left in our term, a year and a few months here, and I don't really see why we should be sending this and having another council strapped with this. I use the word strap, but I don't really mean that, because I believe KDCL has done a fantastic job. But as with any organization, it's only as good as the people that are there, and we don't know how long all those people are going to be there. And so we have seen ups and downs through the years, and yes, we've been up more than we've been down, but I would like to know why this makes such a big difference to push it into 2026 for a new council. I don't understand that. We've been getting along great. They've been doing fantastic work, and I just don't, I would like an answer to that question if I'm going to pull support for that idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor York.
Thank you. So I think my concern about not providing this on a 3 year term would be that in order to reduce the change that we see year over year, they would be able to provide a contract that is longer than a 12-month contract. We also have seen miscommunications that cost $25,000 to the organization, and having these types of things in place, these types of agreements in place, allow for an organization to continue the work that they're doing without running the risk of losing the people that we have all around the table agreed are doing a wonderful job. It gives the organization more stability, and it would probably reduce the likelihood of a $25,000 miscommunication again.
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. I just don't see where there's instability here. They get their money every year. The people that are on KBC, except for the executive director, are volunteers. They're not being paid. And so I just don't see where that instability is. If they want to be on KDCL, they will stay with it. If they're like any group of volunteers, if they don't want to be there, they will leave. So I don't see any instability, and we've never had instability, and I don't understand about any $25,000 miscommunication. That would be bookkeeping on their end, not on our end. And so I do not understand, again, why we need to firm something up for 3 years advance when the waves could be, changing. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, if there's no further discussion, are you ready for the question? The question is with regards to amending the KDCL agreement to become an annual agreement. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed. And the motion fails. Thank you. Or the amendment fails, motion fails. Thank you. All right. So we are back to the original question. And the question is that CAC recommends approval to council at the March 27th, 2023 council meeting of a 3-year KBC agreement as detailed in the attached KBC funding agreement. And further, that annual funding amounts will be established at the meeting of council. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed, and the motion is carried. Thank you. All right, our next item of business is the Regional Recreation Facility Update, and CAO, can you please lead us through that one?
Thank you, Mayor Snow. So on March 7th, there was a presentation to 3 municipal councils, Wolfville, Municipality of Kings and Kentville, with regards to an update of the Regional Recreation Center feasibility study. So that presentation is in your package. The intention is that the information from the work that's been done to date would be made not just available to council, but made available for the general public. So I know that through each of the council's Facebook pages, information has been disseminated out, which not only talks about work to date, but also provides some frequently asked questions and whatnot information. So in your package is the information from that March 7th joint council presentation, and the information is available on the website, and more work is continuing to bring back to councils for further discussion and considerations.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, CAO, and for our public that are here and those at home. The presentations and the detail sheets are available on Town of Kentville homepage. There is also a link to the Wolfville Blooms page, where if there are any updates or changes, there will be details there. And Councillor York, I believe as a committee member, there will be a survey going out with regards to this presentation. If you could just give us a bit of detail on that, if you don't mind. I know I'm putting you on the spot.
That's all right. The communications teams from across the 3 municipalities are the municipal partners rather, are putting together the survey. It'll be sent out to councillors who will then disseminate it throughout the community, and it would be available on all of the municipal partner pages as well. So not much to update, but that's what it is.
Excellent. Thank you. Councillor Maxwell.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to mention, I do believe the Wolfville Blooms is also where citizens can go and express opinions as well, and let us know, or let the municipalities know what they're thinking along this line. So that's important for citizens to know. Thank you.
Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Worship. I'm just wondering if there is any part, now, we all got to see this in a joint session. But moving forward, is there any part of this that would be a deal breaker for us? Meaning spend no more money on it, no more staff time?
CEO?
I think really what we've done is originally there was kind of looked at a two-phase approach here, and there was some information after kind of completing this first phase that I think should come back to councils for consideration. And I think at that point in time, we'd be able to be in a better situation to describe not just, funding envelopes and things like locations and whatnot, but really I think the biggest part is the ability to bring on that other partner, so think federal provincial partner, to support this, because essentially when that's the case, generally at a minimum, they're 50-cent dollars and generally more than that. And so I think those pieces of work would really determine then what would happen with the funding envelope. And I think that piece of work and understanding the avenue and if there's interest there would be, I think, one of the bigger pieces before maybe council would make a go, no-go decision kind of thing.
And the only thing I was thinking of was location.
Yeah.
And I think you knew that.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, very good. So moving right along, we have no correspondence. We're now moving into new business. We've been here for 2 hours. Is there any requirement for a biological break before we continue?
Yes, please.
All right, so council will recess for 5 minutes. Back here for 8 p.m. Thank you.
Mike's not on.
Mike's not on. Okay, we're back from our resets. Yes, 2 minutes late. I guess there was backup at the bathroom. So it's all good. We will move on to our new business. And our first matter here is the land use bylaw zoning map amendment. And CAO, can you take us through the details of this matter?
Thank you, Mayor Snow. So first, council wanted to make sure folks were aware that all the information that you have here was prepared by our acting development officer, Kirsten Duncan, and supported by Director Bell. So this is a staff report to council. I'm here presenting tonight. Obviously, I've been through this report with staff. So this is application of land use bylaw zoning amendment for PID 552-47761. So the town of Kentville has received an application from Brighter Community Planning and Consulting on behalf of the property owner, Mitch Bryson of Bryson Development. The submitted application is considered amendment to the zoning map of the Kentville Land Use Bylaw to rezone a vacant parcel of land identified as PID 552-47761. The intent is to rezone to single-unit dwellings, R1, 1 and 2 unit dwelling R2, and high density residential R4. The subject property is currently zoned large lot residential R5. So in the package for council, there is a briefing note, and in that briefing note outlines kind of the area on the map, and as we go through, I'll also identify a number of the appendixes and maps that are at the back of this document. So the 43.2 acre site is located at the southeast of Acadia Drive and just north of a proposed connector road. The property is currently vacant and includes a portion of the Mitchell Brook watercourse on the west side. The surrounding land uses include existing single-unit dwellings, parkland, bulk vacant lands designated for residential developments. The applicant is requesting to rezone the subject property from large lot residential R5 to a mix of single-unit dwelling R1, 1 and 2 unit dwelling R2, and high-density R4. The requested zones will allow for residential development with a mixture of low, medium, and high-density buildings. The applicant has stated that the developer is committed to placing new single-unit lots next to existing single-unit developments to address any compatibility concerns that the area may have. And so for council, in your package, you have a Schedule A, and in Schedule A, it outlines in yellow all of these lots that are going to be identified. They're all identified as R1 lots. The concept plan for the proposal shows a combination of R1 and R2 zone lots along the extensions of Acadia Drive and Mount Vincent Drive. An unnamed street lined with R2 zone properties buffered by existing dedicated parkland is proposed to connect the two road extensions. A short 400-meter cul-de-sac is proposed to intersect with Carlton Drive, providing access to more R2 zone properties. South of the extension of Acadia Drive, the applicant is requesting R4 zoning for the remaining of the 18.8 acres of vacant land. Under the subdivision bylaw, the subdivider will be required to reserve and convey either an area of usable land or a sum of money equal to 5% of the proposed development, exclusive of streets and any proposed walkways. In addition to the subdivision bylaw's parkland dedication requirements, the developer will be required to provide on-site amenities for any buildings containing 4 or more dwelling units, and these would be particularly in the R4 proposed zoning. So just to give a little bit of background to where we are. So a public information meeting was held on September 27th of 2022. Public comments have been received with concerns of traffic, water pressure, stormwater management, and lack of sidewalks and green spaces. On November 9th of 2022, staff from different departments came together to review and discuss the application and the potential impact on the community. On December 15th of 2022, staff delivered formal comments to the applicant requesting further information relating to the proposed development and rezoning. Between February 22nd and February 27th of 2023, The applicant submitted a revised concept plan for the rezoning as well as supplemental information regarding sanitary sewer and stormwater management. Now, with regards to the municipal planning strategy document review, the subject property is designated residential on the future land use map as shown on the attached map, so that would be map number 1 in council's package, which indicates council's long-term intention for the lands to be residential in nature. Within Chapter 5 of the Municipal Planning Strategy, residential of the Municipal Planning Strategy outlines the objectives and goals for Kentville, ensuring the development is occurring in a manner that meets the needs of all the residents. One of the objectives outlined in the strategy is to provide a variety of housing types to accommodate the various needs and desires of the town's residents. The province is currently experiencing a housing shortage, which is currently impacting the existing housing market, increasing the price on average single-unit homes beyond the average household income can afford. As housing prices for new development are heavily influenced by construction costs, including water and sewer infrastructure, streets, and environmental designs consideration, it is imperative that the town considers and encourages alternative residential development forms from the standard single-unit dwelling. As of 2021 Canadian census, Kentville has a housing stock that consists roughly of 58% single-unit dwellings, 27% apartment buildings, 7% semi-detached, 6% duplex, and 2% row houses. Now, when evaluating such proposals, and we have a number of policies within our municipal strategy, in summary, the proposal is, when evaluating, in summary, the proposal, is it appropriate for the area and in keeping with surrounding development? Does it make efficient use of existing infrastructure and road networks? And is it anticipated to have a positive impact on the housing supply within the town of Kentville? So in council's package, you're going to see there's a number of areas where the staff report looks at the intention of council, so such as encouraging and promoting the provision of affordable housing, ensuring that new residential areas are developed, that traffic impacts are required, a study shall be done. Other studies were also done in making the evaluation of this proposal, which also, as I mentioned, a traffic study was done, which demonstrates that a traffic study was done, but also that a sanitary sewer study was done looking for sewer system capacity along Acadia Drive. That study found that existing sanitary sewer has capacity to accommodate 210 multi-unit dwellings and 144 detached homes before any upgrades would be needed and any upgrades that would be passed along to the developer. There are also 2 statements of provincial interest that are important for council to look at. The first being that of housing. So the goal, to provide housing opportunities to meet the needs of all Nova Scotians. This statement declares that adequate shelter is a fundamental requirement for all Nova Scotians, and furthermore, that a wide range of housing types is necessary to meet the needs of Nova Scotians. With regards to infrastructure, the provincial goal is to make efficient use of municipal water supply and municipal wastewater disposal systems. The statement outlines that unplanned or uncoordinated development increases demand for costly conventional infrastructure. So where we are today, when you look at where we are today, next steps. So we had a public information session back in September 22. We've had our staff review. Basically, at this point, the package that is before council, where we're at CAC, council would have one of 3 considerations. The first consideration would be that council would, at the next meeting of council, give first reading of the proposed map amendment of the land use bylaw as contained in Schedule A and schedule a public hearing, or provide alternative directions such as requesting further information on a specific topic. So for example, if an element of this needed greater clarity, it go back to staff and staff could work with the developer to clarify, or council could consider refusing the proposed map amendment. So these essentially are one of those 3 recommendations, what we're looking for from council tonight. Decisions of council to either approve or refuse the proposed amendment are appealable to the Nova Scotia Utility Review Board within 14 days of any decision.
Thank you, CAO. So based on the recommendation, we'll put a motion on the table so that we can start some discussion. So the motion is that CAC recommend first reading to council of the land use bylaw zoning map amendment at the March 27th, 2023 council meeting. Someone could move that, please? Councillor Huntley, thank you. And a seconder? Councillor York, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that CAC recommend first reading to council of the land use bylaw zoning map amendment at the March 27, 2023 council meeting. Open for discussion. Councillor York?
Thank you. So when we look at these rezoning applications, or like the rezoning map, and forgive me if I'm jumping ahead in process here, but if this were to be approved for first reading, it would be approved as a rezoning, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so where along this timeline would we have a conversation around development agreement versus rezoning now?
So in Kentville, we really don't have a tool here that would be specific to development agreement. Now, that's not to say that as you start seeing more of the tracts of land that would be adjacent to the 101, that a secondary plan, looking at that as a tool. So for example, a number of communities have gone to kind of as a right development with a plan B of using a development plan or development tools. So in this case here, the rezoning application would be under essentially the as a right provisions. That's not to say though that if the developer, as we're moving along and as per what you saw, comments around sanitary sewer, if the development were to abut up against the maximum that the system would have, no development can go beyond that unless there are upgrades made to the system by the developer to allow for further development.
And if I might, another comment. In the presentation that we had with Gary Morse and with Crystal Fuller, if I, there were phrases that were thrown around about, not thrown around, that sounds like it was cavalier. It wasn't. There were phrases that were said about kind of jumping along now, we're fixing problems that were 25 years ago, weren't thought through. And I want to ensure that because this is something that is new to the town of Kentville, this idea, this type of planning, I would like to make sure that when we take a look at these development agreements and rezoning applications, that we're making sure that this is setting itself up for the most success possible and the most buy-in from the community, the immediately impacted community, of course, but then the town as a whole, so that it could be done well and then replicated. So I want to make sure that, I guess, as speaking for myself personally, that if we are looking at these sorts of things, that we're putting in as much thought as we can, and that we are taking a look at it through every lens that we have in terms of accessibility and all the other committees that we have, so that we're not fixing our own mistakes 5 years from now, 25 years from now, and that the residents who are adjoining or abutting that community aren't inadvertently affected by our poor decision making or potential poor decision making.
Did you have anything, any follow-up, CAO?
No, and but I guess that comes down to kind of those 3 decision points tonight. If there's specifics that council would like further analysis around, and so again, to your point, if there's a concern that the accessibility lens with regards to this has not had enough attention paid to it, or if there is some kind of an evaluation against other concerns, then council would bring this back to staff for any further follow-up, because then at what point in time we would be, not just as the town, but also working with the developer to address any of those. And so this is kind of that point in time where it's kind of either a go forward, a stop, or there's questions and there's certain pieces that need to go back to staff for further consideration. And all 3 of them are reasonable, whatever approach is taken.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship.
Solicitor?
Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt, I just wanted to get in line.
Okay.
I usually take the opportunity at some point during these discussions for rezonings to emphasize that there will be a public hearing. And I anticipate you will hear from a lot of interested people. There were a lot of interested people at the public information meeting, and there may be more at the public hearing. And the public hearing is a very useful tool, of course. You may have some initial thoughts, but the public hearing is a very useful tool to hear from the public as well, and take those comments into consideration with how you move forward. But if, as the CAO has said, you have some clear concerns or simply questions at this point, there's an opportunity even between now and council to attempt to have staff address those for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Solicitor. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. So when I look at our municipal planning strategy and it talks about promoting and accommodating an array of dwellings, different prices, locations, and tenure, protecting each neighborhood's sense of identity and diversity as well, and fostering connectivity with the different neighborhoods. There's a few things with this that stand out to me. I like the idea that the construction of the apartments wouldn't happen until the construction of the Dawn Hills connector. I like that piece. I'll stay on that piece for a minute. I feel like I need to talk about points of entry and what additional points of entry look like so these two maps sort of, one, well, there's three actually, and two I think were done by Kirsten, and I feel like the other one was done by Bryson. But I need a better idea on points of entry from McDonald Park Road, because it looks like that there will be an entrance from McDonald Park Road onto this PID. And then it looks like Dawn Hills onto the PID also would be another point of entry. So I feel like I need more clarification on that. I like the idea about R1s abutting to existing R1s. I feel like there could be more to provide a better bifurcation. The net zero stormwater management system that Bryson talks about in the report, I feel like I need to know more about that. There's some talk about gradual density. I want to know kind of what the timeline on that is. I think further when we talk about site plan approval, and my colleague next to me mentioned it was DAs, and when we talk about DAs, I like them just because, it talks about in here, we're able to address very specific details regarding the design and the use of the proposed development. They're a useful planning tool since they allow council to consider the unique opportunities and constraints facing each development proposal on a case-by-case basis. There's a significant advantage over rezonings, which rely on the standard zone requirements set out in the land use bylaw to regulate a proposed development. So with a DA, the council has the discretion, as an example, to increase a side yard where a proposal abuts a potentially incompatible land use, or council may reduce a yard requirement where any negative impact of the reduction has been mitigated. These agreements give council the discretion needed to properly address the concerns. It's also a legally binding contract, and the developer is obligated to conform to the plans that form part of the agreement, and a rezoning doesn't allow this level of development control. So I hear what you say, CAO Troke, that we haven't typically used DAs in the town of Kemptville, but I feel like this might be something that we may want to use a DA for. And I think you mentioned it as well, Councillor York, about secondary planning strategy. And I mean, I realize, this is just shy of a 50-acre development, but this might be the start of looking at a secondary planning strategy with respect to this property. I hear the concerns around traffic, water pressure, stormwater management, sidewalks, green space, and some of those things are addressed in here. The report is excellent. It's very concise. It touches on every point, but I feel like I'm closer to, I feel like I'm closer to providing alternative directions, such as requesting further information on a specific topic, and that being around the DA piece versus site plan approval. That's all I have.
Thank you. Counselor Gerard.
Thank you, Worship. I haven't read all of them lately, but when they came in back, I think it was in September and October, there was a few residents, when they wrote, they referenced specific, I don't know whether they'd be called covenants, bylaws, promises, whatever that previous developers or real estate, if there is any expectations or current, anything that was written down that these, that happened when these lots were sold, could we get information like that? Thank you.
Counselor Huntley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think a little bit of my question is the same as Councillor Gerard's. If there's any promises that were ever made, I'd like to know what sort of follow-up there was. And in moving forward, if there's things like sidewalks that the developer is going to take over, how do we hold him accountable or them accountable? Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to address that, CAO, the sidewalk?
I can, but I think what might be the most appropriate thing is it sounds like there's going to be a collective of pieces of information that is going to come back for council, and maybe it's best that we take the report as we have here and weave those follow-up pieces of information in back for council, so then they collectively see how those will all come back together. And then obviously, and on the sidewalk piece and specifically, that actually ties very closely into Councillor York's piece around accessibility, so we'll have a combined answer on that piece for you.
Perfect, thank you. Counselor Zabian.
Thank you. Through the chair, CAO, you might have said this earlier when you were giving us the information, and if you've already said it, I apologize, but at the very top of Acadia, the R2 area that's laid out says potential to be R4 multi-unit. So, you see right out there, it's right on Donald Hills, on the road, there's a little bit of verbiage there. And then it says total area 2.65 acres, so I'm just wondering what that looks like. It says potential R4 multi-unit site, so.
So in the, sorry, Councillor,
Yeah.
on Schedule A, if you go to the map, everything in yellow would be R1.
Right.
Everything in the peach color would be R2, and everything in the pink would be R4.
Correct. But
Now, and the only thing in the R4, I will say right there, conceptually, where it's showing the connector to, or the driveway or roadway to the potential connector, we are looking at it, any connector would have few connections, and so I do not know that you would see 2 or 3 connections to this property. It would be more than likely there would be one common pooling area that would then feed, whether it's into the R4 site or into the R2.
Well, thank you for that. I'm not asking about pooling. On the Donald, I don't know which map you're looking at, but in that cul-de-sac on the top of Acadia, it's
Yep.
peach right now, right?
Yep.
But there's a little bit of verbiage underneath that says potential R4 multi-unit site option as an alternate to R2 lots in this area.
Councillor, I
If I-
think we've got
If I
an
may.
expert.
Oh, thank you.
There we go.
Sorry.
Didn't see
Go
her
ahead.
there. Yeah.
No, that's okay. I just popped up here. I recognize what you're talking about,
Yeah.
Councillor Zabian. There have been a couple iterations of revised plans that have gone around. Upon further information that's been given to us, there was this new concept plan that was given, and I think that might have just been an error that was left on.
Okay.
At one point, there was the potential for a building there, but again, since we've gotten clarified information, we've gotten the revised plan.
Okay, so if that language is deleted, then it's gonna look like, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
that's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
You're good?
Yep.
All right. Councillor York.
Thank you. And I do want to.
Sorry, Councillor York, Councillor Maxwell has not spoken
Yep.
yet. Please, thank you. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. I see the reports here from engineering firms and so on. Has our engineer looked into these reports, or will he be looking into these reports to give a town stamp of approval on storm sewer and wastewater? So Just,
Did you want to address Director Bell? I know you've been intimately
Waiting.
related.
Certainly, when it comes to the subdivision approval process and when they apply for the streets and anything to do with approval, we review their engineers' designs. I mean, they are professional engineers licensed to practice in Nova Scotia, but we do have final say on the approvals of those plans. So they're proposing a balanced storm flow system, which is required now by Nova Scotia Environment. They have to not increase the intensity from pre-development to post-development. So that will be achieved in their detailed design farther down the road, not at time of rezoning, but of detailed design.
okay. Great. Just
That
wanted
good?
to make sure you're involved.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, Councillor York.
Thank you. So I did want to say, I was remiss, I didn't say it earlier, that I do appreciate the sheer volume of work that has gone into this document from both Kirsten and from Director Bell, and I'm assuming others as well, but I really do want to reiterate how thankful I am that we have experts in-house who can kind of condense all that information down into a document like this. That being said, there was something that was mentioned about the schools, and I know that's not a municipal mandate, but I would assume that there would be some sort of dialogue between ourselves and the province with regard to the impact on the school. And I would just like to put that on your list of things that I would like more information on.
Absolutely, thank you. And so the reality of it is, and it's not singular, in that because of the age and the demographics, there may or may not be different levels of impact, but this is actually an issue across the province because of the growth. I mean, as the province trends north of 1 million people, and places like Kenful see progressive growth, it is across the school system where these pressures are there. And it makes it more difficult than saying this school or that school is going to be impacted, because in totality, the province has seen a massive impact because of this, of the overall growth. So certainly it's a piece that is on the radar screen as part of the evaluation, but I think the larger part is it's even bigger than the impact on a singular school, because we know it's going to be an impact on every school. And that's just because of the sheer size of the growth. Yeah.
Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Your Worship. Since it was brought up, and it's not specific to this development, and it's not really a question, it's more of a statement, I guess maybe it is sort of a question. But can we perfect the, so issues that I've dealt with for the last 6+ years on council have been water issues, water getting in people's basements, water getting in people's backyards. When they've been assured, no, this isn't gonna happen. And I have a huge concern for it now from people that I've talked to, from developments that didn't happen and ones that did. And I think the worst answer we can give when someone calls and says, I now have water in my backyard, is to say, you gotta call the developer, it's out of our hands. So if we can some way have a side conversation while we're talking about this, about how to remedy that issue, I think that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. This is probably a question for Kirsten, or it might even be for Crystal. The map that says Bryson Developments, done by Design Point, the one before that you would have done up, Kirsten, I wish that the one that you did up looked like the one that Bryson did up, because the one that he did up, it's I don't follow it, because it says Acadia Drive existing, and then it goes into Acadia Drive, and then what looks like should be Dalhousie is way over on the other side, and then you've got there's a street there called Street A. So I really find that map helpful, because I can see like where the R1 and where the R2 are, and then I can see the green space, which I think is really important, because that provides bifurcations as well. But it's very hard to read it on that, and I see Mount Vincent and then I see Dalhousie way over on the other side, and then Acadia is way over here. Like it just, I find it a bit hard to read. So maybe that map can be perfected a bit more. Or maybe it's the way I'm reading it. It could be. Do you think?
I can read it on my phone.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for your commentary, solicitor. Anyway, yes,
If
please.
needed, I can provide more information in regards to that for you.
Okay, thanks.
And I was just going to say the exact same thing. I think that Kirsten has a great ability to take them and particularly if you have areas you want to zoom in on, we can focus on that, which might help
Yeah.
kind of just with the perception of where things are going to land.
Yeah, okay, thank
Okay.
you.
Counselor Maxwell.
No, thank you. I just wanted to make a comment about the school and education. I doubt very much that the Department of Education is going to make any decisions based on a development. Department of Education makes decisions based on enrollment figures each year, and that's the way that new schools are built and so on. And so every year they do enrollment and do projected enrollments, and that's usually the way it goes. Thank you.
Counselor Zabian.
Thank you. We've had so much activity since this came to light from citizens, and I mean, that's myself why I'm here. I have to listen to the public, but could CAO, just, some people may not understand the process, how this is gonna look over the next, X amount of months, what tonight is, and further that people understand. So not everybody understands the process, and I think that would be helpful too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor, I appreciate that. So tonight, this is kind of the staff report has come to council. It's the opportunity to ask for clarity, for further information. The process would be that either the documentation would come back to the next council meeting, and if council was satisfied with what it saw, you would then do a first reading and then move forward for a public hearing. If council still had further or additional information, then that would be moved forward down the road for that first reading to occur at a later time. Obviously, there's a window in which you have, from receiving a completed application, 120-day window where you want the process to move through. So tonight, this is initial report to council, looking for feedback and, again, decision, either go, no go, or more information. If council at the next council meeting in 2 weeks was satisfied, you could do first reading, and then following that, a public hearing would be scheduled.
Thank you.
All right, CAO, based on the discussion we've had this evening and your mad scribbles on that sheet of paper, I would like to poll council with regards to consent to change the motion to the second recommendation, which is to provide alternate directions such as requesting further information, because I think each one of you has asked for further information. So I am using consent. If there is no one that objects, I will change the motion. So the motion is that CAC return this document to staff to provide alternative direction, such as requesting further information. Don't have to go there, but we will return to staff. If someone could move that, please. Deputy Mayor, thank you. And a seconder. Councillor Huntley, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that CAC return the document to staff to provide alternate information. Is there any discussion on that? If there's no discussion, are you ready for the question? The question is that CAC return the document to staff to provide alternate information or further information. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed, and that motion is carried. Thank you very much.
I want to thank Kirsten and Dave and the other folks who've been involved in this for putting this together, and really appreciate that for council, we want to make sure that we get every piece of information you need so you can make your decision.
Thank you, CAO. Thank you, staff. That was a great report. It was very clear, it was concise, and it was very orderly in the way that it was produced and provided to us. So our next matter is with regards to an urban forest bylaw. CAO, if you could introduce this matter to the speaker.
Thank you. So this is something we've talked a little bit about over the last number of months. So Craig Langell is here today. As we've done in the past, we sometimes put together the straw dog for council to take a look at and receive feedback. So Craig, if you'd like to make some comments about what's before council.
Sure. Thank you, Council. So the Urban Forest Management Bylaw, so just to provide a little bit of background on it, the town of Kemptville has an outdated inventory of our public trees in a database. This was collected some 10 to 15 years ago. And it records the tree species that we have in our parklands. It has the age of the tree, the diameter, condition, and the location of the trees. So the next step would be to reassess all the trees at some point in the near future. The next part is that our trees are vulnerable to invasive species. One specifically that has just come to rise is the East Asia invasive species called HWA, which is the hemlock woolly adelgid. And this was located at the gorge. So we found a site at the gorge. And this happened last year. And so basically what the insect does is that it attacks the tree, kills the tree, falls from the tree, and then once the public is in the parkland walking around, it attaches to their clothing, attaches to their feet, their bikes, however they might be using the parkland, and then they transport it out to other parkland, another space. So this bylaw that we're trying to propose, it's not a new concept. It's something that we've actually developed from the Halifax Regional Municipality, as well as the town of Truro. And what's being proposed for discussion will indicate to the public how we, the Town of Kemptville Parks and Recreation Department, manage our beautiful parks, how we provide the public with procedures to inquire about our Town of Kemptville public trees that they may have concerns about, whether that's the tree may be overlying on their property, or they just have a general concern about a public tree. And then what the benefits are for having trees on our public lands as well as on private property. And then if you look at the end of the document, we've created a process for applying to have a tree trimmed or removed, which we do get inquiries on a monthly basis, maybe once or twice a month, in regards to trees that may be dying or, that could potentially have HWA. So that's what's being proposed. What we're hoping that council could review and provide some feedback on.
Thank you very much, Mr. Langell. We appreciate this, and the recommendation is for council to take this urban forest bylaw for homework. Your considerations: is it too restrictive, not restrictive enough? Do we need a bylaw? Is there anything missing? Other comments, and all comments should be back to the CAO for distribution to staff by March 30th of 2023, and that way it can come back to us at that time. So if there's nothing more on that, you've got your homework on that one. Thank you, Craig.
Thanks, Craig.
All right, our next piece of business is with regards to a request for decision with regards to policy G21, conference attendance. And council has received an RFD on the matter of conference attendance policy G21. And Councillor Zabian, did you wish to speak to the RFD?
I did, thank you. At the February 27th, 2023 council meeting, Mayor Snow said that typically the mayor and two councillors could travel to the FCM conference, which is the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. A poll was conducted, and at that time, the following members said they would be attending this conference: Mayor Snow, Deputy Mayor Savage, and Councillor Huntley. The language in policy G21 states that the mayor and CAO will be given the opportunity to attend and encouraged to attend this conference annually. Policy G21 further reads that a maximum of 3 councillors can attend annually. Further to that, at the September 26, 2022 council meeting, Council agreed to incur costs for Councillor Huntley specifically, who applied to sit on an FCM committee. Council, with the exception of Councillor and Councillor Maxwell, voted to incur all costs related to Councillor Huntley's travel to FCM conference during her time as a member on the FCM Standing Committee. And this could be multiple trips a year. The town would have to incur travel costs associated with Councillor Huntley. So I've reached out to other towns similar in size to Kentville, and many do not send any members, and some felt that this trip is filled with perks rather than a trip that provided a lot of value to their town or unit. I also reached out to some of the larger units, and many of them also do not partake in this FCM conference. As for applying for grants through FCM, you do not have to attend the conference to be eligible for grants, and I provided documentation just so that we're all aware of that. So in conclusion, this means that potentially, I think I have 6 here, but it should be 5, from the town of Kentville could be attending FCM. These conferences are in a different province annually. This year, or the last year, it was in Toronto. This year it's in Toronto, but last year it was in Regina. I think this year the conference fees are $11.61 if you book it before April 21st. And this fee is just, you're due to attend. You also have to account for airfare, accommodations, meals, etc. So it's quite a large number. And just for reference, the last conference, which was in 2022, Mayor Snow attended and her expenses, the dues were $920, the airfare was $1,051.51, accommodations were $720, and FCM expenses were $550. I'm assuming that's meals and maybe travel kilometers. So the total for that per person was $3,243. As well, Councillor Huntley attended. Her fees were the same, except her FCM expenses were a little less, and her total expense to the town was $3,137.06. So another point too, this always coincides with Apple Blossom Weekend, and if we have no mayor and no deputy mayor here, I think that's an important point. Councillor Huntley is already attending these conferences, so we're gonna pay that regardless. So I believe that we should limit the FCM travel to one member of council. Again, not to say that other members of council cannot attend, it is only to say that those who choose to attend would have to incur the cost themselves and not the town. So I'd move that we review policy G21 prior to the FCM conference, which is in May of this year, and that one member of council have the opportunity to attend annually, and that this member may or may not be the mayor, and that if more than one member wishes to partake in this trip, the names, they could be drawn from a hat. It is preferred that a different member attend each year, and if more than one person wishes to attend, anyone who previously attended would not be able to put their name forward. The member who is selected, who does make the trip, should return with a detailed report and prepare a presentation to council and to the public so that they can, the public can see the value, and council as well, in the findings of this member. Thank you.
Thank you. So if we take your motion, basically you're asking that we reduce the number of attendees at FCM. So the motion would be that CAC recommend to council to reduce the number of attendees at FCM. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you're moving that?
Yes.
Okay, and a seconder, please? Okay, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that CAC reduce or recommend to council to reduce the number of attendees at FCM. Is there any discussion on this matter? Councillor York.
Thank you. I'm uncomfortable when we get into territory where we're gatekeeping education. It's been mentioned before that none of us have poli-sci backgrounds, none of us have community engagement backgrounds. This is an opportunity for councillors to further their education as it relates to municipal politics and municipal government. I'm also concerned about language that says that members, or council members rather, would pay their own way. I think that puts a minimum income threshold for fully participating in municipal politics. And in 2023, I think we should be removing barriers instead of adding them for people to participate fully.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. I just wrote a couple of things down here, and I think my last FCM was, I feel like it was 2018 or 2019, I can't quite remember, but You know, I look at FCMs being that national voice of municipal government dedicated to improving the quality of life in all communities by promoting strong, effective, and accountable municipal governments. So I think our collective voice is important. With our collective voices, we get results for our citizens and for our communities. I'm a huge proponent of learning. I looked back at some of the things that FCM has done with respect to broadband, housing, Canadian Community Building Fund, which was previously called gas tax. I looked at the slate for this year, conserving heritage, inclusive and resilient economic growth, housing intensifications, and I think it was the last NSFM that I attended where HRM had a symposium on housing. And I found it so helpful in my discussions moving forward with this council, and I think I presented on that or spoke about it after the last NSFM. Many of these sessions take place at the same time, and so typically what we've done in the past, if there's a few of us there, we all sort of say, okay, which one did you want to go to, which one did you want to go to, and we try and cover them all off. Sometimes we both, 2 or 3 of us, go to the same one because we have a different lens. We all have different lenses around this horseshoe, and that's what makes everything so interesting in terms of how we, process some of the matters that come before us. I find it interesting that a councillor is bringing this forward who hasn't attended FCM or NSFM, because it's really hard to gauge those functions and those conferences when one hasn't been there. I remember my first NSFM and I remember my first FCM, and I brought many learnings, and I brought them back to council, and I can apply it with my own lens, and I believe it makes me a better councillor to do so. I'll go one step further. The councillor who made the motion actually put a post on his Facebook page, which is perfectly fine, just bringing it forward, making the public aware that this was something that he was going to have on the docket tonight. And I believe one of the comments with respect to his with respect to his post was that FCM was looked at as a vacation, and that those who would take part in it were corrupt. So I take great offense to those comments. Great offense. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Zabian.
Thank you, Mayor Snow. Just for clarity, I didn't make those comments. Just, is that what you were, just through the chair, is that?
No, you're
Yeah.
not speaking, you're speaking to the chair. You're not speaking to other
Well, I
councillors.
just, for clarity, because it sounded
Okay,
like.
that's fine. You've made that declaration.
Anybody can go on my Facebook and look. I didn't make those comments. Regardless, it is 2023. People are starving, and we just had a presentation on homelessness, and we have like the largest group of homeless people in Kentville, and we're gonna go spend $15,000 in the month of May for 3 days. I think that is a problem, and I'm just kind of astounded right now where some of you think that that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Maxwell. Oops, sorry, just wait, go.
Thank you. Full disclosure, I haven't been to an FCM, but I've done lots of chatting at NSFM with different,
Halifax 2018,
yeah,
FCM.
Yes, I did go to FCM, that's right, because it was in Halifax. Exactly right. It's the only one I've gone to. I believe that we get a lot of information from FCM through emails. We have the opportunity to do online learnings on the various topics. And we have conferences in the province, NSFM, and we basically touch on all those same issues and same topics. I believe very much in learning. I believe in lifelong learning. I'm an educator. I would never say don't learn, but there are all kinds of ways in 2023 to learn. And there are all kinds of ways to expand your knowledge. And I think that in discussions with councillors from other units, I mean, they don't send anybody. This is a Kentville thing. And so it's right to question it. It wasn't something that we decided, I don't believe. I believe it was, the policy was probably here before us. But it is pretty much a Kentville thing, and I do believe Halifax, being a larger municipality, attends FCM. Personally, FCM comes to Halifax, I say, yeah, let's go. But when FCM is in the prairies or out on the West Coast or even in Toronto, I think using public funds to explore learnings at taxpayers' expense, when those learnings can be had much more easily and much more financially conducive to the day. I thought the councillor was doing a good thing by allowing one to go. Personally, if it was up to me in this economic climate, I would say, no, we don't go to FCM unless it's in the city. And that's how I feel. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, I've got you on the list, but as you've already spoken once, I'll give an opportunity to anyone else, and if not, then I have a few words. So the funding of conferences and training opportunities is an investment in the success of elected officials. These opportunities ensure that elected officials are trained and prepared to meet the challenges of their four-year term and provide a means of remaining current with the ever-changing political and community pressures. The demands on a municipal elected official have never been more complex or varied. Based on my experience over the last 6 years, the following training should be mandatory for all members of council: financial management for elected officials, Robert's Rules of Orders, asset management, first aid based on upcoming changes to occupational safety, Department of Environment, water utility responsibilities, Department of Just, Police Commission, including the Act and the regulations, a primer on the MGA, governance, orientation with DMA, orientation with the town of Kentville, harassment training, cultural sensitivity training, Nova Scotia human rights training, and any specialized training required for membership on a board, commission, or committee. The following conference opportunities should be provided to members annually: the NSFM Spring Conference and the NSFM Annual Conference. The following conference opportunities should be provided to a member at least twice during their term: the FCM Annual Conference, the FCM Sustainability and Climate Change Conference, the Asset Management Conference, and the Planning Conference. Council members should be encouraged to participate in both provincial and national boards, committees, and commissions. The funding of conferences and training is not a waste of taxpayer dollars. It's an investment. It ensures that our elected officials are trained to provide the best decision-making for the town, and that we are cognizant of our fiduciary and governance responsibilities, that our decision-making is the best for the town of Kentville, and are based on clear and measurable criteria, and are balanced and respectful. Kentville is a leader in community planning and economic development. Staying ahead of the curve and sharing our experience benefits not only our community, but also the wider regional, provincial, and national communities through our participation in training and conference opportunities. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to make two notes. One was with respect to the post that Councillor Zabian had posted on conference attendance. The comment when I noted that there was a comment around FCM being vacation and corrupt, it was not a comment by Councillor Zabian, but yet one of his followers or somebody who commented on his page. Also that when
Point of privilege, please. I don't think we need to start pointing out who supports who on this council.
Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. Your point is taken. Deputy, reserve your comments, please. Thank you.
Did you want
Continue.
So, and when FCM is in HRM, there's a fee to go. There's the hotel, and then there's the travel, and there's the meals. So I understand that when we go to FCM in another province, there's the flight, but there still is, when it's in HRM, there's still the conference fees and the other associated fees. Those are my only comments.
Thank you. All right, Councillor Zabian, as the mover of this, you have the the privilege of speaking a third time on the matter, so I will just poll to make sure that there's no one who hasn't already spoken who wishes to speak. All right, just let me go. No. Now.
Okay, thank you. Just want to, for clarity there, I never said that I didn't want to learn or that I didn't want to encourage anybody to learn. I have put down one person, and I think for the size of the town, one person is more than fair. And I'm just going to end off with a comment. The next time that there's a pothole or a sidewalk that needs to be repaired, and we sit up here and say we don't have the funds this year, just remember that we spent $15,000 on FCM this year. Just something to keep in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, if there is no further discussion on this matter, are you ready for the question? And the question is that CAC recommend to council to reduce the number of attendees at FCM. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed, and the motion is defeated. Thank you. All right, our next matter is a request for decision with regards to parliamentary process. The council has received an RFD on the matter of parliamentary process and rules. CAO, did you wish to speak on the request for staff to prepare a document?
Thank you, Mayor Snow. I would suggest perhaps before we create new documents, I do know that there was documentation that I've seen that would have been in council's package in 2020, which provides an outline of parliamentary process and various procedures. So I would suggest that perhaps before we go down the road of creating any new documentation, we might want to recirculate the documentation that is already available. And then if there's any questions following that, perhaps we take a look at it.
Thank you very much, CAO. So I just want to remind council that parliamentary procedure and rules of order are governance and not assigned to staff. This request is inappropriate and contrary to the rules of order in that it speaks adversely on actions that have already been taken. The member, for a second time in 2 meetings, has taken the opportunity to name and criticize other members of council. And incidental motions are questions of procedure that arise out of another motion, and they must be considered before the other motion. Unless 2 members of council are prepared to immediately appeal the decision of the chair, the decision is not debatable and stands. The RFD is actually designed to permit members of council to bring ideas and matters to council for decision. They are not a means of criticizing council for decisions taken. This matter is closed. We'll move on now to our public comment. So members of the public are invited to speak to council on the matter that is currently before council. Please provide your name and address, and you will have 3 minutes. And there are numerous people in the audience tonight, so I will be very cognizant of your 3 minutes. And please keep the matter to something that is currently before council. Thank you.
Good evening, Dennis Keogh, 29 Alicia Boulevard. I recently issued a Freedom of Information request to the town respecting a comment the CAO made in a council meeting last May on a draft lease for a comfort station. The town responded to my request and provided related correspondence. The town's economic development coordinator emailed the building owner on April 19, 2022. Thanks for meeting with us on site before Easter. I hope you had a good weekend. We are enthusiastic and excited to move forward with the comfort station project. I did speak with the CAO after our meeting, and we are good to move forward on a lease creation. The next day, the development coordinator sent a second email further to our phone chat yesterday. Rent $12.50 a month. Facility includes 1 toilet. Town to pay electric bill separately. Landlord to take care of flooring. Landlord to remove existing outside awning covers. Town to replace awning covers with new branded ones. KBC grant money to take care of soundproofing 1 wall between the comfort center space and existing tenants. I have a feeling that soundproofing wall might be a sticking point for my folks here. Any chance we can pitch this as a shared expense? One thing we still want that I know you remain hesitant about is that that back outside wall for a mural site. Any chance you'd let us do the mural as part of the lease agreement? We didn't talk about lease length, and I don't have an indication on my side of what we're looking for, but I'll get back to you on that if the CAO has a preference. About a month later, a draft lease was provided to the town by the building owner, and everything the development coordinator requested in her email is in that draft lease. Meanwhile, in a CAC meeting November past, Councillor Maxwell asked for an update on the comfort station. The CAO responded, and I quote, "We have had a number of conversations with a number of folks with regard to spaces. There has never been a lease negotiation between myself and any organization," end quote. Councillor Maxwell pursued the issue. At that point, the CAO indicated, and I quote, "So, Councillor, a third-party lawyer drew up something and handed it to the town. That's not a process on how you sign a lease. So just to be clear, if someone wants to come in and say, here's something I want you to consider, anybody can cold call anybody. There was no lease negotiated," end quote. In my Freedom of Information forum, I requested all correspondence prior to the May 2022 council meeting and all subsequent correspondence after the May 2022 council meeting. In the CAO's initial response to my request, the CAO proposed this search criteria: all correspondence between town and the building owner from date of receipt of the draft lease. If I had accepted the CAO's proposed search criteria, I would have not have received the emails I alluded to earlier, which were received prior to that draft lease, which would have tended to support the "somebody sent us something" narrative. If this was intentional, and I am not suggesting that it was, and I have no knowledge that it was, but I defer you to the town solicitor to explain to you the serious implications of this. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Sharon Kehoe, 29 Alicia Boulevard. The town of Kentville still does not have a comfort station. Why? When you read the evidence provided through Freedom of Information, it's obvious that the building owner would have been negotiating with the town of Kentville in good faith. And yes, I mean negotiating. He appears to have engaged legal counsel to develop a lease for nothing. That would have cost him time and money. Where was the town of Kentville's good faith? Why was this lease abandoned? Why didn't it go forward? Why do we not have a simple bathroom in Center Square? Surely you have not deprived the town of Kentville of having a bathroom in Center Square simply because you got wind that Councillor Xavier was going to purchase Mr. Wiles' building. You are attempting to put in place what you're calling a respectful workplace policy. If that wasn't so arrogant, so bizarre, I'd laugh, but I can't. Let's recap how you got there. 2 councillors questioned CAO Trope regarding the proposed comfort station. Where are we? Why haven't we moved forward? The discussion goes back and forth, heating up not only by the 2 councillors, but by the CAO in his responses. The question to ask is, why did it heat up? It heated up because every response the CAO gave to legitimate questions from these 2 councillors, who are effectively his bosses, no matter how many times, no matter how different they rephrased the question, his responses were inaccurate, as verified by the evidence we reported on here tonight, as well as KDC produced a report in March of 2022, presented it to this council, that actually showed the proposed comfort station in a picture. So yes, there was a negotiation. There is no mistake about that. There was a collaborative lease drawn up. There's no mistake about that either. In the May 2022 meeting of council, the CAO shared that a meeting was scheduled to review this draft lease to make sure all the puts and takes were in place. That meeting did not take place. Why not? However, paramount is, why did the CAO insist there wasn't, empathetically insisted? Remember his words, "Let me be clear. No negotiated lease, no ambiguity, no misrepresentation of facts." Now, did he have a very big memory lapse, or was it deliberate? And if it was deliberate, that's a whole other story. One would think that you would be the ones looking for an explanation. I know I'd like to have an explanation. 5 of you instead scurry off in camera and come up with a way to protect the CAO's feelings. You might want to focus on getting to.
You're off. Your time is up. Thank you.
This is insane. We paid enough money that if you can't do your job.
Council, Matt Sabian, resident here in Kentville. I appreciate the time and everybody coming out tonight. I'm going to speak to the proposed rezoning application on the east end of Acadia Drive, PID 55247761. I'm going to highlight a conflict between the proposed rezoning and development and the land use bylaw of Kentville. So, with respect to infrastructure and the environment per Part 10 environmental constraints overlay of Kentville land use bylaw, the purpose of the environmental constraint overlay is to restrict land uses and development in areas that have an increased risk of flooding, erosion, slope failure, or other unique features which cause them to be environmentally sensitive to development. And also that property owners are responsible for all the risks associated with development, effectiveness of flood-resistant measures, and the impacts of development on neighboring properties. One of such areas of increased risk would be those in steep slope areas, which as per section 10.2 is those areas of greater than 25% slope grade, of which much of the proposed R2 and the majority of the proposed R4 development is in excess of 25% slope grade. Permitted uses for steep slope as per section 10.2, conservation and related projects, passive recreation, walkways and trails, public works and utilities. Per section 10.2.3, permitted structures, no development permit shall be issued in the steep slope overlay for construction of any permanent structures except those associated with public works or utilities constructed by the town of Kentville. And per policy NE9, page 66 of the municipal planning strategy, it shall be the intention of council to limit development in accordance with the land use bylaws in areas that have slopes in excess of 25%. And again, the majority of the proposed development project is in excess of 25% if you look at the map overlay. Therefore, per policy NE9 of the municipal planning strategy, council should limit development of the proposed rezoning to lower density, keeping in accordance with the land use bylaw in areas in slopes of excess of 25%. Also, as per chapter 13, natural environments, the municipal planning strategy, while there are many steep sloped areas within the town that are currently developed, the areas of most concern are the ravines that form important natural drainage ways for and wildlife corridors, and 2 major ravines and 1 major waterway borders the proposed rezoning and development that we're talking about here today. Therefore, my statement will be as per objective 2 of 4 articulated in section 13.1 objectives and goals, page 64, to direct development away from areas of high flood risk and steep slopes, and objective 4 of 4 to limit development within or on environmentally sensitive lands. Development of high density rezoning not be recommended for PID 55247761 per the developer's application. Also, further to Parks and Recreation comment tonight, there's a high density of hemlock, mature hemlock forest in the proposed PID. And as he mentioned, the woolly adelgid is confirmed present in the gorge, which is nearby. Therefore, development there would significantly impact the mature hemlock forest. And the northern goshawk, which is on the conservation list for Nova Scotia Lands and Forestry, there is annual nesting of northern goshawk, a family of northern goshawk in the PID, and I can walk you right to the nest tonight if you want. So that's my statement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Pat Norton. I've lived in Kentville for 45 years. And I've recently been on the Canada Infrastructure website, and I noticed that a total of 13 Nova Scotian towns, municipalities, and First Nation reserves have been approved for a grant of somewhere between $5 million and $50 million to implement smart city technology in their town or region, all in line with the World Economic Forum goals. And this would include, of course, 15-minute cities and 15-minute towns. And the concept there, if people haven't heard of it, is that we would be expected to live within a 15-minute walk or bike ride of where we live. And towns would be divided into districts, and the borders of those districts would be the borders of our life. It's being rolled out in Edmonton at the present moment. The nearest towns and municipalities to us that have been approved, and I guess we'll be putting this in place, are Annapolis County, Annapolis Royal, Digby Municipality, and Digby. So that's a pretty significant change in the way people do things. And surprisingly, very few people seem to know anything about this. So picking up on Mayor Snow's comment, staying ahead of the curve, I think this is something that's really, really important to stay ahead of the curve on. And picking up on Jeff Matart's comment, a public hearing is a very useful tool. My strong recommendation is that the town of Kentville inform itself thoroughly about these 15-minute cities, the smart technologies, and implement some sort of a format whereby the participation and input of the community can be engaged. And to that end, I've brought, for your reading pleasure, if I can I just leave them on the table there, one each? It's a national newspaper and some information on the World Economic Forum's ESG goals. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kate Smith, and I live at 27 Colonial Avenue here in town. I am only one citizen of Kentville who is hoping, pardon me, to see in print form the code of conduct that applies to the mayor, CAO, and councillors of Kentville. The agendas for meetings on January 30th and February 27th both include items referring to said code for the in-camera sessions. And that encourages me to think that a printed document will be available soon. Are these points part of that code? Integrity, honesty, impartiality, responsibility, and accountability? The depth of this council's divide, as viewed at the February 27th meeting, is becoming an impediment, I feel, to town business. It becomes harder to get the public's work done when there are challenged relationships on an elected body. It's embarrassing to watch. All of you claim to be familiar with and to be following Robert's rules, but last meeting showed some unequally applied examples when points of order and points of personal privilege were called. To be fair to the person who tries to fulfill the role of chair at these meetings, several councillors are disrespectful of her efforts to do so. That may satisfy some need to communicate one's frustration in the moment, but is not how proper procedure is followed. If any of you is intending to run for re-election in a year and a half, be aware that voters are watching how you improve the way the entire group adheres to the code of conduct you seem to be working on. Voters want professionalism, integrity, transparency in their elected officials.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Leanne Jennings. I live at 2 Lacewood Drive, Kentville. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I appreciate that it's getting late and many of you might be tired. So if you don't mind your attention, a few short minutes. I'm going to start by asking a few rhetorical questions. Would you go into surgery knowing that the person conducting the surgery was not a licensed practitioner in the medical field? Would you take legal advice from somebody who did not pass the bar exam? Would you have your taxes done by somebody who has no accounting credentials to their name? I'm going to guess that the answer is no, and I'm here to speak to you about land use planning, because what I've heard tonight is a planning report submitted by non-planners. Planning is a licensed profession in the province of Nova Scotia. It is legislated, there's a body governing it, we have minimum standards that we must meet, and yet this municipality, this town, is okay with operating with no professional planner and has for many, many years not had a professional planner at the helm of where this community is going. For those who may not be as familiar with the profession of planning, land use planning can be defined as managing our lands and resources. Through careful land use planning, municipalities can manage their growth and development while addressing important social, economic, and environmental concerns. More specifically, the land use planning process balances interests of individual property owners and, let's say, developers with the wider needs and objectives of the community and can have a significant effect on a community's quality of life. So we're selling ourselves short, and as a taxpayer and a professional planner myself, I am requesting that there be a higher standard in this town. And I'll point out that in the application from Bryson Developments, the question was asked, did our professional engineer review the engineering documents to ascertain whether they were legitimate and can we verify them? You had a professional to lean on and you trusted that person. But you are interpreting your municipal planning strategy without the benefit of someone who's a professional. And in my own personal reading, my unsolicited opinion, I don't believe there's any supporting and enabling policy. And I say this with the most respect for your staff and Mr. Troke and his staff and the excellent work that they've done. It is all done in good spirit and in good effort, but it falls short of an adequate planning report. And I will say to you that the concept of having a secondary plan so that we can take a step back and take stock of what do we want for our community. We're building a whole connector road. What is the density? What is the balance? How do we know? Well, your current municipal planning strategy doesn't tell you that. And to say that this is a legitimate, valid rezoning moving forward is doing so without adequate policy. The planning report does accurately say that this is appealable to the Utility and Review Board. The standard is, does the rezoning fulfill the intent of the municipal planning strategy? Not one or two pieces of it. Yes, we do need affordable housing. Yes, there could be, R1 as a buffer. Does that deem it to be compatible? Has land use compatibility been achieved? Well, there's nobody here qualified to say that, and I think that your community is telling you that that hasn't been achieved, regardless of how much R1 you have abutting and then R2. There's also a threshold in your municipal planning strategy that says you have to conceive of all possible build out of your zone because you have no control once rezoning takes place. And it says council in making their decision should conceive of all future possible full build out. Do you feel adequately prepared to make that decision right now? Do you have a sense? What is the possibility? What if the developer finds expenses are too great? We need to up that density much more, and the zone allows for it. I mean, you look at your R5 zone and it's essentially saying this is future development. It's going to be kind of on hold, minimal is allowed. Does it give you any direction to say, when is the right time to start developing? In what ways are we going to develop? How fast? In what areas? You're letting a developer decide he's ready to develop the land, but you have no real plan in place to do that. So I'm sorry if I'm making this sound overly obvious, but I really would like to have a very solemn look at this. And I assure you, the developer has a professional planner working for him, and you don't. And when you go to appeal, which this could very easily go to, I bet your solicitor is going to look for a professional planner to sit on the stand to vouch for you. So why wait till this goes to appeal? Why not have a professional planner giving you advice right here and now? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Benjamin Cortons. I live at 88 Grant Street. So I'm also going to speak to the proposed rezoning of the south end of Acadia Drive. Many of us who live in that subdivision experience a lot of concern about safety on our roads. We don't have any sidewalks, but even if we did, sidewalks would only serve to help give over our roads further to automobiles. Many of us who live in that subdivision walk there every day. We walk on our roads for an hour every day. We take our dogs for walks, we see children playing, and one benefit of that subdivision being very, very low traffic is that currently it's reasonably safe to do so. There are many issues with safety in the subdivision, with drivers not slowing down sufficiently downhill especially. But this proposal makes no real accommodation for accounting for the increased traffic that it will produce. This proposal will bring in hundreds of new citizens every day that will have to exit that subdivision every day. And given that people are playing on the street, there's not going to be any way for them to get out of the way quickly enough. I actually wanted to speak specifically to a few points of the document. Policy RS-23, the intention of council that new residential development shall provide for efficient and safe movement of pedestrians and cyclists. No traffic calming measures are proposed, such as speed bumps, tabletop intersections, etc. The other one is Section D, providing for parks and community spaces. There's no provisions given really for parks. There's green spaces, but there's no actual pathways proposed or access to get around from different neighborhoods from one side of the roads to the other. And for policy T9, it suggests merely adding a left turn lane off of Park Street when that will not really address any of the concerns to residents living within the neighborhood. It seems mostly designed to get further cars into the neighborhood. Quickly focusing on the Don Hills Connector Road proposal, this is a proposal for a road that will connect two areas of Kentville that are already very close to the highway and already have good highway access. If it is proposed to be a residential access road for the people who are going to live in this new area of development, it should not need to be developed as an arterial road. It should be a low traffic volume road with provisions for the active transport plan, which would require it to continue to feature a multi-use pedestrian and cycleway on its side. I apologize, that's my timer for 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Nancy Acker, and I live at 44 Mount Vincent Drive. That's one of the new streets up in the McDougall Heights area. We completed our house, sold a house on Dalhousie, reinvested in the town because we looked everywhere else and we thought, you know what, we want to be here. So a year later, we moved in our house. I think it was last May. It was kind of sporadic, but the water that is running down behind us, beside us, around us, and the neighbors beside us that have built is coming in river format. When the spring rains come, it's going to pick up again. In the fall and in the winter, when the rains came, the rain was at least no less than 4 inches deep, halfway out into the street, going down to Mount Vincent onto Acadia. The small stream that runs behind all our properties on Mount Vincent was flooded out completely where Mount Vincent joins Acadia, and the water was going nowhere but all over the street. There's no place for the water to go up there. So what do? Do we connect it into the town? How do we do that? Do we go back to the developer and say, you only put 4 inches of infrastructure in there for drainage pipe? It probably should be 6 or 8. Where is the accountability to a developer when they do the minimals? Well, then I hear from the neighbor the other day, the town is coming up and digging a trench between the house below me and the next house. Well, all of a sudden that's on my back as a taxpayer because development was just kind of, well, whatever, we'll put the minimal in and whoever lives up there or develops or builds after that can take care of that. So, you know, does it belong to the town? Is it the town's fault? Is it the developer's fault? Well, I'm the taxpayer, so I'm kind of caught in the middle of all that. So I've walked that area for years. I've lived in McDougal Heights for 20 years. I love it up there. There are tons of underground springs and streams that run where Mount Vincent is and in behind it, and where there's going to be duplexes or 2-unit dwellings right in my backyard. So where's the water going to go? When all this, the more you clear cut, the more water is going to flow. So that's a really big concern to me, and I know as a taxpayer in the town that we're probably going to have to fit the bill for water abatement or something that obviously hasn't been done. And it is there, it does exist, you can't ignore it. You can tell there's water there just by the growth in the vegetation along the sides of the street. So the more you develop up above us, the more water's gonna come down, and it's, you know, water keeps moving down towards the down part of the hill. So, you know, somebody above us can say, we're gonna go in and do a great development and we'll do water abatement, but what about everything that's below that? Who's gonna take care of that? I don't know where this person is gonna funnel all this water to, off their land, obviously, that they're developing, but we're the people that are gonna catch it down below. So that's sort of my point. It's a great place to live, but really, really think hard about your proposals and your development and what your plan is for this great town that we all live in. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much. We have no in-camera this evening, and our agenda is complete, so therefore I would call for adjournment at 9:29. Thank you very much.